Good evening. Let me call to order the meeting of the St. Helena City Council for June 14th, 2016. Mr. Pitts, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Absolutely. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. And Ms. Gamero is going to be our clerk this evening. Can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Krull?
Here.
Doring?
Here.
Pitts?
Here.
Vice Mayor White?
Here.
Mayor Galbraith?
Here. That takes us to public forum. This is an opportunity for members of the public to comment on matters not on our agenda, but relating to municipal affairs. Comment is limited to 3 minutes. Does anybody wish to speak at public forum? Seeing none, we'll move to reports by staff and city council. We'll start with reports by staff. Ms. Phillips?
I have nothing this evening. Thank you very much.
Mr. Brown? Nothing, sir. Ms. Mitz?
As this whole majority part of the meeting is budget, I have nothing else to report either.
Ms. Gamero?
No, nothing.
All right, that's a good start. Mr. Hausch?
I would like to add that the EIR comment period was extended to July 25th of this year for the general plan EIR, so just let the public know that. And the Planning Commission is having a study session on the general plan on the 21st of this month, so a week from today, as well as a public hearing to take EIR comments.
All right, Mr. Palmer?
Yes, I'd just like to let the community know that our annual slurry seal project will be starting up probably next week and continue for about a month. People that are on affected streets will be getting door hangers, notices about parking and whatnot, so they can stay off the streets while the work's being done. I have a list of streets I can read off really quick. They're Vineyard Avenue, Doris Avenue, Doris Court, Hillview Place, Elmhurst Avenue, Quail Court, and North Crane. That's it.
Very good. Ms. Crichton?
Good evening. I just wanted to let everybody know that the summer reading program at the library has started. As of this afternoon, we had 340 kids signed up.
Wow.
So yes, just a week and a half. So we've been very busy, and this year we also have a summer reading program for adults. So you can find out all about it at the library's website. And at the end of we're having a summer of events. This month there will be Extreme Science on June 23rd. And June 30th, we're doing a Pride Night with an information fair. So everyone's invited.
All right, very good. All right. Any reports by members of the City Council? Mr. Pitts? Ms. Kroll? Ms. Doring? Mr. White? And I have nothing. So that takes us to number 6, a proclamation. And if Ms. Iris and Ms. Cohen could come forward, please. This is a proclamation for LGBTQ month. Oh, yes, all right. I'm having a problem with the microphone this evening. There we go. Is that better? Yes. All right. But in light of what happened in Orlando, I thought it appropriate to begin this way, and that is with a paragraph out of a column by Frank Bruni in yesterday's New York Times. But let's be clear, this was no more an attack just on the LGBT people than the bloodshed at the offices of Charlie Hebdo in Paris was an attack solely on satirists. Both were attacks on freedom itself. Both took aim at societies that, at their best, integrate and celebrate diverse points of view, diverse systems of belief, diverse ways to love. And to speak of either massacre more narrowly than that is to miss the greater message, the more pervasive message, and the truest stakes. And so with that, I would ask that we have a moment of silence in memory of the victims at Orlando and also in admiration for all the responders. And with that, let me read the LGBTQ Pride Month proclamation. Whereas the city of St. Helena celebrates the vast diversity of its citizens, including those who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer or questioning, and seeks to be a safe, healthy, and tolerant place for all citizens and their families. And whereas the city of St. Helena strives to be a community that offers equal opportunity, whose citizens all deserve to live with dignity and respect, free from fear and violence, and protected against discrimination, regardless of their gender identity or sexual orientation. And whereas June has become a symbolic month in which lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer or questioning people, their families, friends, and allies come together in various celebrations of pride. Now, therefore, let it be resolved that I, Alan Galbraith, Mayor of the City of St. Helena, do hereby proclaim the month of June to be LGBTQ Pride Month, dated July 14th, 2016. And let me sign the proclamation. And it's wonderful to have you both here, and two children as well. And here is the proclamation. If either of you would like to say a word, or both, please do.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Many members of the local LGBTQ community couldn't be here tonight because they're actually attending a candlelight vigil in Napa for the victims and the families of the victims of the tragedy in Orlando. And one of the things that we need to take from what happened is that there are too many LGBTQ people who are still not accepted. They're not accepted by their families or by their school, their employer, or by their community. This past weekend was the Napa Valley LGBTQ Pride celebration. And one of the events was actually here in St. Helena at the Bocce Courts, because I happen to know someone in the recreation department, so I got hooked up there. And the event was hosted by Unity Napa, which is Napa's LGBTQ social network. And I serve on the steering committee for that organization. And part of our mission statement reads, to present ourselves as out and proud examples to our community at large, to be present, visible, and positive. It's so important to the LGBTQ community to be visible, to be acknowledged. So by issuing this proclamation, St. Helena is saying that we see you, and we acknowledge you, and that you're valuable to our community. So on behalf of myself and my wife and our two daughters, and on behalf of the entire local LGBTQ community, I thank you. Thank you for officially recognizing us as an equal part of the St. Helena community. Thanks.
Okay, that takes us to a presentation by Marin Clean Energy, and presenter is Alexandra McGee. Good evening.
Thank you. Oh, great.
Just click over here.
There we go.
Okay, never mind.
Just when I thought I had the power. Okay, well, good evening, Mayor, council members, and members of the public. Thank you for having me here tonight. My name is Alexandra McGee. I am replacing your previous Napa County Representative Allison Hang, a colleague of mine who presented to you previously. Since your council voted to join MCE, we've gotten the wheels turning on a lot of different events and outreach, and I'm here to present to you an update on that outreach, as well as ask for your feedback on any following events where you would like us to be present. So for members of the public who may not be aware, MCE is a public agency. We are a joint powers authority that becomes responsible for the generation of electricity for jurisdictions once they decide to vote. Once they vote to join, such as the jurisdiction of St. Helena has voted to do. So we are intending on enrolling the community of St. Helena, if you could just go back one, in September, meaning that this first phase of your electrical system will undergo a shift. MCE will become responsible for the generation of the electricity and will procure electricity on your behalf from more renewable sources. We partner with PG&E to deliver that electricity to your homes and businesses. The same service as always. If your power goes out, you still call PG&E. The only difference is that now you as the customer have different choices as to where you want your electricity to come from. So just as a background for everyone, for people who are hearing this for the first time, these are the mechanics of community choice energy, and this is what is becoming available to residents and businesses in St. Helena. So to go through the last couple months, all 5 jurisdictions in the county of Napa voted to join MCE by March of this year. As I mentioned before, this means that the different electricity provision will start for this jurisdiction beginning in September, depending on the date that your billing cycle begins. So what you see here is actually a billboard that will be going up around Napa County. For those who are interested in going 100% renewable, we have options that I'll go into later. And then also at the very bottom, we have our own webpage for additional information, mcecleanenergy.org/Napa County. And then also your city has put up its own page, which is cityofsthelena.org/energy. So anyone else who's looking for more information on what this means, I encourage you to go to both sites. So as an update on what MCE has been doing in St. Helena, the first of 5 notices will be landed today in mailboxes around the city. We are legally required to send out 4 notices. We send out 5 just for good measure, and the first of them went out today. They will land today and tomorrow, meaning that myself and a colleague will be in in City Hall tomorrow and the next day to deal with any walk-ins who come in and have questions about their electric accounts. Because it has the seal of St. Helena on the letter, we wanted to make ourselves available so that staff wouldn't feel overwhelmed if there were many walk-ins that come in with questions. So when we leave on the 16th, your staff will be trained on the basics of how to answer questions about community choice aggregation, what the different choices are that are coming to St. Helena, and they will, most importantly, know how to escalate a concern that comes in that they're not sure how to answer. Also during this time, we have a multilingual call center that is open 24 hours a day. They speak 108 different languages, so anyone at all really who is interested in their energy can call in and get that information. Would you mind switching again? Thank you. So I'm here in part to ask for your feedback. We have been working closely with staff to develop a community outreach plan. Part of that community outreach plan is to be as sensitive as possible to local context and demographics. So we've identified that senior citizens who are 65 and older are require special representation and outreach, as well as those who speak a language other than English at home. In St. Helena, it's 34% of your population speaks a language other than English, which is why we definitely want to be creating relevant language-sensitive documents. Also, we will be putting together a community leader advisory group, which will hopefully be meeting, I have it written here, on the 6th of July. So we're looking for community leaders in all 5 jurisdictions to be present to inform MCE so we can be the most responsive we can to your constituents. So if there are any suggestions of who you think should be in those meetings, please let me know. So our outreach plan includes advertising venues. We'll be taking out ads in the St. Helena Star. Also this community groups to make sure we reach out to communities that are important in St. Helena. We will also be reaching out with one phone call and at least one email to all the large commercial and industrial accounts in the area. And we have, we'll be at different community events. We'll be at the musical picnic, actually, coming up, and I think the next 4 of them. So, and at the library as well, and at the farmers markets. Would you mind switching? So just as a reminder, now there are different energy options that will be coming to the residents and businesses of St. Helena. They include the default program that will be automatically enrolled in September is the light green 52% renewable energy product. Customers will now have the option to opt up to 100% by paying a little bit more. It's about $5 more a month for an average residence. Or they can go even further and source all their electricity from one solar project based in Novato, which we call Local Sol. And everyone always has the option to return to PG&E service, which is currently about 30% renewable. And this slide I wanted to touch on, unfortunately, it's a tad out of date. So when the 5 communities of Napa decided to join MCE, it meant that we could procure energy for them and take advantage of the economies of scale that that purchase would lend. So we expected to be able to reduce our rates by 7.5%. That 7.5% reduction is reflected up here on the board. It would have meant that a residential cost comparison, if you just look at the first 2 columns, so for PG&E service, $94.27 would be your average cost. And for a light green 50% renewable service, 22% more renewable, would be at parity with that cost. So we went out into the market to procure, hopefully to reduce our rates by 7.5%. But the market, the way it is right now, is so low for renewables that we were actually able to procure at a 9% reduction. Meaning that the light green product, this is all pending board approval on Thursday's board meeting. But pending board approval on Thursday, the light green product will actually be a little bit cheaper than PG&E's bundled product. And I'll note that if you really want to get into the details, you can see that our generation is already cheaper, but there is an exit fee that we're trying to absorb. The exit fee is a fee that's charged by PG&E. It's not our fee, but in order to make ourselves cheaper, we had to reduce our generation rate even further in order to absorb that exit fee. So this is what we're looking at for a possible cost comparison for a residence. And the next slide is what those rates would be for a commercial account, if you wouldn't mind switching. And again, these are with the 7.5% reduction, and I'll come back to you with what 9% looks like. On both of those websites, hopefully, we will be able to represent what a 9% reduction in rates means. And just for the bigger picture, you know, this is our trajectory. Our default program is currently 52% renewable. We are aiming for that default program to be 80% renewable by 2025 and 95% carbon free. And with the help of the cities in Napa and St. Helena, we're hoping to get there soon. And just my last note here is just to remind everyone kind of the purpose of why we're doing this. Between 2010 and 2014, we were able to reduce energy-related greenhouse gas emissions by 122,000 metric tons. So we look forward to adding St. Helena to that roster and seeing our environmental impact. And with that, I will open it up. If any council members or mayor, if you have any suggestions as to who we should be reaching out to in your community, I'm all ears.
Okay. Are there any questions from council at this point? I've got one here. Is there a number of folks here in town have solar panels on their homes, and then they go through a true-up period with PG&E once a year. I'm not sure whether it's always at the end of the year or during the year. In our case, I think it's at the end of the year. But the question I have is, with respect to opting in or opting out, how does that work with solar panels? And if it's an involved explanation, can I find it on your website?
Good question. So I will make it available on the website. So so the first notice lands today and tomorrow. The second notice will actually have specific information for customers that have solar panels on their home.
Good.
They will be getting a second document called a buck slip that goes into their notice with information about their true up and how to deal with the opt-out, opt-in. In short, the true up is established on the date that your meter gets interconnected into the grid. Your system gets interconnected. So every house has a different true up date, depending on when you installed your panels. So if the installation happened after September, typically what we do is we encourage those customers to opt out until their true up date, because we don't want them losing the credits of their summer generation. And then once the true up happens, depending on whenever that date is, we encourage them to opt back in, because we have a highly beneficial net energy metering program that credits them at retail plus a penny per kilowatt hour for their excess production. So rather than what you might get a 3 to 4 cent credit with PG&E with your current system, we will credit you at retail, which is about 9 cents, plus a penny, which would make it 10 cents. And that credit is available not just to apply to your bill, but to cash out. If you get credits over $100, and every April we send out a message saying, "Congratulations, thank you for being a local producer. We can cut you a check if you like." And we did that last month, and we cut checks for approximately $975,000 to our customers in our service area. And one of those customers, I think they wouldn't be too shy with me mentioning this, but the city of Benicia, because they have a substantial solar array, will actually be getting a check for $110,000 because of their excess production. So if anyone was thinking about going solar, it's an added bonus.
Now, you mentioned this July 6th meeting. Do you know where it's going to be? Is it one community meeting, or is it a meeting in each community?
So given staff feedback from the 5 jurisdictions, we've actually decided on having one community leadership advisory group, the CLAG, which is not a very delicate acronym. So the CLAG will be a combined effort from all 5 of the jurisdictions, and we'll be meeting in Yountville.
Meeting in Yountville. All right, very good. All right.
Is it fair to state that the added PG&E fee, the PCIA fee, is not a fixed fee, but that it can be renewed year to year? I assume that fee will go up as more people, if more people transfer from PG&E to MCE to, in effect, reimburse PG&E. True.
Right.
And how is that incorporated into the decision making in terms of competitive cost?
Right, so we are actually in conversation at the CPUC right now about the PCIA stands for the Power Charge and Difference Adjustment. It is charged on a monthly basis to all customers of Community Choice. So it's not just MCE, but other agencies like us around the state. The purpose of the PCIA is to recoup the possible losses that PG&E may incur for having entered into energy contracts prior to knowing that, for example, the city of St. Helena is going to leave. So PG&E entered into contracts on the city's behalf, and to be colloquial about it, is left holding the bag when St. Helena decides to change their generation provider. So this cost, if they sell that energy on the open market and they lose money on the bid, then that cost is passed on to the customers. So the PCIA for every person depends on how much electricity you consume that month, and it is supposed to expire. But in MCE's opinion, there's still a lot of work to be done, which is why we are at the CPUC trying to change the methodology of how the PCIA is calculated and when it's set to expire.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? My thought would be maybe to put on the agenda at the next meeting a quick discussion to see whether we can select one of us to go to the July 6th meeting. That's okay.
Sure, noted.
By that time, someone will have decided that he or she should volunteer. I guess my only further thought was this, and that was that we have something called the City Selection Committee, and the City Selection Committee agreed at its last meeting that we would all use Supervisor Brad Wagenknecht as our director, at least for the moment, so that you were not overpowered with 5 new directors from 5 different jurisdictions. But that remains open to discussion, but that's where that stands. All right?
Can I ask one quick question?
Sure.
So the PCIA is like a breakup fee that we all agreed to some time ago that we're essentially paying for on a per kilowatt hour basis if we switch as a community. Is that a fair way to characterize it?
Yeah, it was established prior to community choice, the first community choice in California. So it was actually charged to direct access customers, who are large entities, usually industrial, but also could be, for example, a university, that decides to leave generation service and procure energy on its own. And so it becomes an independent entity with an enormous load. And so the PCIA was actually established based on that context. And so on a household by household basis, because an individual residence doesn't demand nearly as much as a direct access customer, there's a scale issue to how the PCIA is applied. But your initial premise is correct. It was established as a breakup fee, or we call it an exit fee, much before we were even an agency information.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
Great.
Appreciate your
Thank you very
presentation.
much.
All right, that takes us to our consent calendar. And just to refresh, I'm going to read through the consent calendar. Any member of the City Council or any member of the public can pull an item, in which case we will deal with it as the next order of business. So, item 8, consideration and proposed approval of regular meeting minutes of May 24, 2016. 9, consideration and proposed approval of a resolution accepting bids and awarding contracts to the lowest responsible bidders for furnishing chemicals for water and wastewater treatment plants in a total amount of $40,144 for fiscal year 2016-17. 10, consideration and proposed approval of a resolution authorizing and approving a budget adjustment request transferring $63,961 from assigned reserves for budget shortfalls due to the resignation of 6 employees and 1 retiree who received payouts of their entitled vacation and allowable sick leave accruals. Amounts to be transferred from assigned reserves are $45,330 from the general fund, $5,910 from the water fund, and $12,721 from the wastewater fund. 11, consideration of proposed approval of a resolution approving a 2-year agreement with Housing Authority of the City of Napa in an amount not to exceed $83,149. 12, consideration and proposed approval of a resolution calling and giving notice of the general municipal election to be held in the City of St. Helena on November 8, 2016, and requesting the Board of Supervisors of the County of Napa consolidate the general municipal election with the statewide election. 13, and here we have an amendment number 1, a corresponding resolution that was passed out, but it makes a correction, but the issues there are stated correctly in both in the staff report. So and in the notice. Consideration and proposed approval of a resolution approving amendments number 1 to the employment agreement with Jennifer Phillips, proposed amendments including authorization of additional 40 hours of executive leave, implementation of a 1% PERS cost sharing agreement, and to correct an administrative error. 14, consideration and proposed approval of a resolution authorizing and approving publicly available pay schedules in accordance with the requirements of California Code of Regulations, Title II, Section 570.5, which includes revised salary schedule for Police Officers Association, mid-management, and at-will employees, and approval of proposed amendments to unrepresented compensation resolution, including authorization of additional 40 hours of executive leave for at-will employees. 15, consideration and proposed approval of resolution authorizing an amendment to the contract between Safety Police Management of the City of St. Helena and the Board of Administration of the California Employees Retirement System, or CalPERS, to include pension cost sharing. 16, consideration and proposed approval of resolution adopting a schedule of parks and recreation fees at existing rates for fiscal year 2016-2017. Now, does anybody wish to pull any of these items? Hearing none, the chair will entertain a motion to approve consent items 8 through 16, a massive amount of administrative work.
Approval.
Second.
Roll call, please. Ms. Gamero?
Councilmember Kroll,
Yes.
Vice Mayor White,
Yes.
Councilmember Doring,
Yes.
Pitts,
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith.
consideration and proposed approval of a resolution approving the annexation of territory into the St. Helena Municipal Sewer District Number 1, MSD annexation number 128. This is 90 Dahlia Street, St. Helena, APN 009-431-001. Mr. Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, this item is to annex the property at 90 Dahlia Street into the sewer district. This property only recently became available to city sewer with the construction of El Bonito sewer project that was by the Magnolia Oaks development. The resident now has asked and petitioned us to annex into the sewer district so they can connect to the city sewer. At the last meeting, the council established this as the public hearing date to move forward with that annexation. That's it. We just have to have a public hearing, see if there's any comments, close it, and we can move forward with annexation, and then the folks can have city sewer.
Any discussion? Just refresh me on one issue, and that is that the old septic system gets destroyed in accordance with county regulations?
Yes.
All right. And this is the first of what we hope to be many sewer hookups in that area over time. You're saying emphatically yes?
Exactly, yes.
All right. Is there a motion to approve this item? Do we have to open it up? Oh, public hearing. Anybody wish to speak at public hearing on this item? Excuse me. That was the whole point of it. Let me close the public hearing.
So I move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Cameron, roll call.
Vice Mayor White,
Yes.
Kroll,
Yes.
Pitts,
Yes.
Doring,
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith.
Yes. Okay. That takes us to consideration and proposed approval of a resolution approving use of affordable housing trust funds to support our town, St. Helena, construction of a maximum of 2 very low-income houses at 684 McCorkle Avenue for a total cost of up to $100,000. And the presenter on this one is Ms. Phillips.
Yes. Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. If you'll recall, we've been working with Our Town St. Helena for many months now on for them to develop an affordable housing complex, 8-unit complex on the McCorkle property, which was purchased by the city with affordable housing trust funds with the hope and intent that an affordable housing unit could be built on this property. We've been working very collaboratively with Our Town St. Helena. I'm at the end of a bad cold, so pardon me. And so we've made a couple of changes. We did the original purchase agreement where the city sold the property for $1. We had to do an amendment to that. And now I'm coming forward representing a request from Our Town St. Helena. They have the opportunity to potentially have 2 and possibly even 3 units deed restricted to very low income. And to be able to do that, they're requesting council's interest in providing additional funding up to $100,000. And mechanics to do this haven't been worked out, but before I spent the money on attorneys and negotiating how we would do this, I wanted to first ask the council if you have an interest in contributing another $100,000 to this project that potentially could then make 2 to up to 3 units available for very low income families. And so currently in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, there's about $1.3 million available. We've committed $500,000 to the Turley Flats project, so you need to take that out. We're still hoping that project's going to come forward, and Director Hausch continues to work with Calistoga Affordable Housing to make that happen. We've also committed, the council's committed around $75,000 to use Affordable Housing Trust monies to cover the fees that are related to the Our Town St. Helena project. And so it leaves around $750,000 available. And so the question is, would the council like to contribute another $100,000 towards this project so that 2 and maybe 3 of the units could be, or a minimum of 2 of the units could become very low income housing? I would then work with the attorneys and Our Town St. Helena to figure out how mechanically that would work and bring back any documentation for your review and approval.
Okay. Any initial questions of Ms. Phillips? Let me open the public hearing. I'll close the public hearing. I just have one question. That is, does this help us on our Calderon settlement?
No, it does not. In the Calderon settlement, it doesn't specifically identify low or very low. It just specifically identifies the number of units. But it certainly helps us towards our housing element where there is requirement for very low income. And it provides additional diversity in our community and in this project.
All right. Okay. Any council discussion?
Look, I think this is a very important project. I think for at least a decade where I've been watching, we've been struggling over the size of projects in our town, and this is a model for future housing development in St. Helena. Small infill projects. Our town has figured out how to make it work in a collaborative effort with the city. I'm fully supportive of this. If we can get 2 or even 3 units that are low or very low out of it, to see this project through, but see it through in a manner that's even better for our community than currently planned and programmed.
I agree. This is why we have a affordable housing fund to fund things like this.
Mr. Doran?
I don't have any comments. I'm supportive of the direction of the council.
I'm very supportive. I mean, it's been a long time. I'm glad to see that something's finally getting done on this, that I think we had a vision of it for quite some time, so.
Well, I certainly am in agreement with my colleagues. So at this point, I'll entertain a motion to approve the item.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Camaro?
Excuse me. Councilmember Pitts,
Yes.
Vice Mayor White,
Yes.
Kroll,
Yes.
Doring,
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith.
Yes. All right, that takes us to consideration of proposed approval resolution adopting fiscal year 2016-17 City of St. Helena annual budget. And I'm informed that Ms. Mitz is going to take the lead on this, but perhaps after a couple of introductory comments from the city manager.
Got too many binders going on here. Wow. Thank you very much. If you had the opportunity to read the budget letter that I wrote for the City Council and the community, I just want to go over some highlights with regards to our proposed 16-17 budget. This is what we would consider a status quo budget. There are no additional discretionary services, staff, or programming because the city continues to struggle with expenditures outpacing our revenues. Within the budget, you'll find that 2 positions, as we identified during the budget workshop, remain vacant. In Public Works, I want to thank Director Palmer for holding 1 position vacant, as well as the Library Director, Chris Crichton. So we have 2 positions that are unfilled and unfunded at this time because we didn't have adequate revenues in the general fund to be able to fill those positions. We're also going to talk about the water and the wastewater funds, which are both experiencing financial shortfalls and are really need to be addressed this year, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Our focus this past year was on operational stabilization and developing strategies for securing the city's financial future based on the council goals and direction from the City Council. We tried to maintain service levels, be in compliance with state and federal regulatory requirements. We focused on records management, transparency, and hopefully improved our community engagement. The council goals that you set for us in your goal setting in February 2016 were to maintain our quality of life by sustaining and enhancing revenues, maintain functional and safe city by supporting and maintaining the staff, and manage workloads and dedicate resources for proper project management. Some of that came out of our experiences of the flood control project and some of the challenges that we've had. And so we as staff appreciate council's recognition that having the quality staff that we have and supporting them and being able to manage our workload effectively ultimately sometimes can be frustrating because we can't do all things all the time for everyone, but being able to manage that workload effectively so we do things properly and accurately. We also did a community survey, which I know the finance director is going to mention as well, but again, the community is starting to understand, and I really appreciate that through our messaging and through our council meetings and through the communications that we've been having, the community also recognizes that maintaining the city's long-term financial stability was the #1 priority that came out of a survey of nearly 300 respondents. Also maintaining 911 emergency services, police and fire response times was a priority, as well as repairing the roads. Unfortunately, in this year's budget, monies towards the roads were not an option, but we understand that that's certainly a priority. We are very proud of our accomplishments this past year, and I want to thank the council for your guidance this past year as we've dealt with some difficult issues. We've had to spend additional monies that we didn't expect. We've had some difficult challenges, and the staff appreciates your support and your leadership through these challenges. We've done a lot for the community. I think we've worked well with the community, and we've had a good year in 15-16, and the team is looking forward to moving forward into 16-17. For the 16-17 budget, you'll see a modest growth. Again, our expenses are continuing to outpace our revenues. We have a $10.6 million general fund budget that we're presenting to you. It is balanced. You gave us some direction during the workshop in May to balance that budget. But there are no general fund revenues going to the general fund reserve, and so we're at the 22%. So again, we're not meeting your informal goal of 25%, and we were not able to put any monies away, and we did have to make some cuts just to be able to balance the budget. So that tells us that we have inadequate revenues to properly manage this organization, and I believe that we're managing it very efficiently and effectively. We are not overstaffed. We are in no way fat in any of the edges. This team is working very hard to look for efficiencies, to look for shared services opportunities, to cross-train as best that we can. I think a year or two ago I mentioned that if our city clerk ever got sick or wanted to go on vacation, we wouldn't be able to hold a council meeting, and because of creative staffing and effective cross-training, we have Zinnia here tonight because our city clerk is quite ill today with a bad cold, which, by the way, she says she got from me, and I am continuing to deny that. And we miss her, and we appreciate that Zinnia's here. And those are the kinds of things that we've been able to do. Council had the confidence in us to add this position for Zinnia's recruitment this past year, and we've definitely needed it, and she's been a great addition. And so these are the kinds of things we're carefully trying to do to be able to run a functional organization for you in this community. And I hope that we've made good decisions, and you've been supportive of those things this past year. I mentioned the water and the wastewater funds. You gave us a direction at the workshop to make the rate review a top priority. Myself and Director Palmer, along with Jennifer Toole, who's the project manager, are doing that. We recognize that that's important. And quite frankly, rates are going to increase. We are bringing in inadequate revenue in both funds to properly manage, to have operations, maintenance, and do the improvements that we need to do in both of those aging systems. And so we have some challenging things coming ahead for both you and the community. We understand that. But it's not possible to cut services from the water and the wastewater systems. We have to meet the regulatory requirements. And if we don't have the adequate revenue to be able to do that in either of those funds, then the general fund has to backfill that. And for example, with the wastewater fund having a zero net position, which is what's projected in this budget, if something happens at the wastewater fund, the general fund will have to pay for those improvements or project or whatever potentially could happen at the wastewater fund. And so the necessity to have a healthy general fund reserve and to have healthy net positions for the water and the wastewater fund are critical to the health and operation of this organization and for this community and for this city. In my opinion, 2016-17 is one of the most pivotal years in St. Helena's history. We need to find significant and sustained revenue increases, or we're going to be looking at service reductions for 17-18, especially for the general fund. We're going to have adequate revenues. We've established no sinking funds this year. I've talked about that on numerous occasions. We've put no money aside for any of those capital asset recapitalizations. So vehicles, IT, buildings, parks. We do have Measure T coming in 2017, 18, 19, which is about $665,000 in the first year. That's very helpful, but that's just for streets and roads. And so at some point, we can't keep kicking the can down the road and not investing in our buildings. We have to take care of the Carnegie building. We need to look at the Corp Yard. We have to do something with City Hall and Police Station. And so ultimately, the decisions are going to get more difficult if we can't find that increased and sustained revenue sources, especially for the general fund. We continue to work very hard. I'm very impressed with Director Palmer and his commitment to meeting the regulatory requirements of the water and the wastewater facilities, and those have to remain a priority for this community. We're under strict requirements and recommendations and requirements of the Regional Water Quality Control Board and the Water Board, and it's essential that we continue to meet those compliance requirements. I want to thank Director Mitz. She really handled a lot of this on her own this year. This is only her second time through for being a finance director here in St. Helena for us. She did an impressive job along with Mandy Kellogg, who's the Administrative Services Manager, Tracy Prokosky, our Finance and Grants Manager, along with Kathy Robinson, who helped a great deal on the human resources side in getting our salary and benefits numbers to be accurate for this 16-17 budget. Again, the department heads, this is a team effort. They took this process very seriously. For some of them, it was the first time around, and so I feel a high level of confidence with this budget. We're going to continue to grow. We're going to continue to learn. We're going to continue to make improvements. But I appreciate your time at the workshop and then your time tonight as we go through the budget for you. Thank you.
Director Mitz?
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going to be going through the presentation as well as various department heads are going to be presenting their budgets tonight as well. So first, I did want to add a little bit about the economic overview, and this was included in the budget document this year. There are definitely many factors that can affect the budget. So in considering our revenue forecasting for 16-17, information from a variety of sources had been utilized. This included various economic forecasts, and in the economic overview in the budget, it lists the sources. County of Napa has provided much information to us regarding primarily our property taxes, and then also Muni Services, who we contract with to do our sales tax projections forecasting, as well as provide us up-to-date information. So for the U.S. and California economy, I'm going to start at the bigger scale, and then I'm going to work our way down to St. Helena. So for U.S. and California, it is estimated that the California economy will maintain steady growth. California is experiencing faster job growth than the rest of the United States. Job creation is remaining positive within California. Unemployment rates are approaching pre-recession levels, and there are rising home values statewide. So within California, home values are rising. So continued for U.S. and California is that the gross domestic product, or the GDP, is forecast to grow between 3% and 5% in 2016. So what that is a growth rate of 3% over what it was in 2015. And GDP is considered one of the primary indicators used to gauge the health of the economy. There's two different ways GDP can be viewed. There's two different formulas, and economists have some very technical formulas that I can't even begin to explain, but they measure GDP in two ways. One of them is basically how much money are people taking in, and the other is how much money are people spending. So they are expecting that is to grow 3 to 3.5% above what it was in 2015. September 2015, the national economy had matched the growth rate for 2014, and it's expected to keep accelerating in 2016. Growing tourism and a slow shift in consumer spending from retail to restaurants has led to the leisure and hospitality sector to exceed 4% job growth in the past 4 years. So bringing it down one level, down to the county level, in a 2014 report, the economy had continued growth in Napa County. Jobs related to tourism and hospitality increased in Napa County. Napa County experiences a 3.9% unemployment rate, and in addition, at the same time frame, they experience a 3.9% job growth rate. And I believe the average for California right now is, I believe it was like 4.9%. So you can see the county of Napa is definitely below what the state unemployment rate is. The largest employment increases were in leisure and hospitality, manufacturing, education, healthcare, and construction. Some additional information for the county of Napa is Napa County visitors. It's estimated they spent $1.27 billion in 2015. This was an increase of 8.9% from 2014. Napa tourism brings the area total of approximately $115 million in tax revenue each year. So what does this mean for St. Helena? For St. Helena, our major general fund revenues are transient occupancy tax, or TOT, brings in 21%. Property tax is 31%. Sales tax is 27%. The top three sales tax economic segments for St. Helena is, out of the total amount of sales tax taken in, the 27%, 25% of that comes from restaurants. 19% comes from food processing equipment, and when you break it down further with the Muni Services reports, it's primarily wineries and vineyards. And then building materials and retail is 12%. The top 25 sales tax contributors generate 62.5% of the sales tax collected. So out of all the businesses that we have in St. Helena, the top 25 sales tax brings in well over half of our sales tax revenues. TOT has steadily increased for St. Helena. Property tax is estimated to be a 3% increase for fiscal year 16-17. A percentage of the increase is based on cost of living increase, which cannot exceed 2%. And then there's also a continued upward adjustment of property values, and that's due to home sales and the reevaluation of the home price, and or if somebody's doing construction and improvements on their home, and so the home value is reassessed. For long-term financial planning within the city is we will continue our efforts to maintain a balanced operations budget. As City Manager Phillips stated earlier, there are not a lot of bells and whistles in this budget. It is a status quo budget. We do have certain uncertainties for California. First, we have the economy, and then we also have the impact of the state budget on local governments. As we've known from years past, one of the most infamous, I think, is the triple flip, is that when the state budget does get a little tight on things, they frequently will look at local governments as well as imposing different mandates that are unfunded. So those are definitely uncertainties for any city in California. All indications are that the state is experiencing a slow but steady economic recovery. For fiscal year 16-17, the proposed budget assumes that there are no state takeaways and no new unfunded mandates. We have not heard of any yet, but it does not mean that they will not happen. Staff will continue to monitor the city's budget and also the economic trends, and definitely inform the council and the public of anything new that's happening that will affect our budget. So for a budget overview, this will give you an overview of what we've done to get to the point that we're at right now to present the final budget. On February 11th, there was the annual strategic goal setting meeting. On March 8th, the City Council adopted their strategic objectives set at this goal setting meeting, and City Manager Phillips reviewed what the goals were a little earlier. So it's maintaining our quality of life by sustaining and enhancing revenues, maintaining a functional and safe city by supporting and maintaining city staff, and then also managing workloads and dedicate adequate resources for proper project management. In addition, we did do our community survey, which we did receive a little over 300 respondents. And as just an overview, the top 3 priorities for the city, for the residents that weighed in, number 1 was maintaining the city's long-term financial planning, or long-term financial stability. The second was maintaining 911 emergency services. And then the third priority for them was the road repairs. On May 4th, we met together at the firehouse, and we had our all-day special budget workshop. And City Council did provide the following direction to staff to balance the budget as required by state law. City Council directed us to fund each nonprofit 50% of their original request. The original request was $70,100, and so the City Council authorized funding of $35,050 amongst all the nonprofits. We did decrease the City Attorney General Fund budget to offset the amounts for the nonprofit funding. Decrease the City Attorney General Fund budget to offset the estimated, at that time it was about a $52,000 general fund shortfall, so you'll see those reflected in the numbers. Establish a $50,000 capital reserve fund for the comprehensive flood control project as required by SRF, and that $50,000, it was a direction to take that from the general fund reserves. And then use water fund reserves of a little over $1.3 million to offset the water fund shortfall. A review of our general fund expenses, and this is general reviews that will apply across the board for all the departments that are presenting tonight, is there is an increase in salaries that was approved by the City Council, 3% increase for all SHIA members as part of their Memorandum of Understanding or their MOU, 4.5% for police officers as part of their MOU, 3.5% for dispatchers as part of their MOU. Fire department did make the transition from a paid per call to part-time employees. As far as benefits, there is an increase in health benefits for Kaiser and Anthem is a net increase of 4%. That is definitely dependent on the type of insurance an individual has, as well as the number of dependents that they have. So we'll see some fluctuations between departments. There's an increase in dental and vision benefits of 15% and an increase in life insurance of 6%. So our expenditure budget by department, I'm not going to go into too much detail because the department heads will review this themselves, but you can see between the departments on the left-hand side, how much is spent out of general fund, how much is from other funds, and what their total budget is for the year. Expenditures by fund type. So you can see the difference, and this chart really shows the net change in fund spending. So for general fund, there's only a 4% increase this year. Water fund, it's a 1% increase. Wastewater fund, it's a 44% decrease. The primary reason for that large of a decrease in the water fund was in fiscal year 15-16, we had litigation settlement agreements that we did pay. We also had fines and penalties that we had to pay for, I believe it was Pond 1A. Okay, I want to make sure I'm saying that correct. And then additional legal fees. So that's a primary reason for the decrease in this fiscal year. And other funds, it's an increase of 35%. That 35% is primarily due to the amount that we're expecting to be able to draw down from Measure A to make towards the SRF loan payment. So overall, you can see our percentage change. We're only 3% higher throughout all of our funds for this year's budget compared to last year's estimated year-end budget. So the all funds, so this is the expenditures year-to-year comparison by department. So you can see the general fund, the water fund, wastewater fund, and other fund. So you can see our spending from last year to this year really hasn't changed much. The largest one that you'll see is the other, and that again is dependent on the drawdown for Measure A funds to pay towards the SRF loan. General fund expenditure comparison by department. So here you can see this is just general fund, but the changes by department. So non-departmental decreased by 37%, city council increased 22%, city manager increased by 2%, finance decreased by 15%, city attorney decreased by 15%, planning and building increased by 8%, public works increased by 24%, fire is 8%, police is 12%, recreation is 45%, and library is 3%. I do want to note that the recreation budget, the increase is primarily, oh, you know what, I am so sorry. I'm off on my explanation for that. I'll have to look up my notes on why the increase in recreation. Your general fund expenditures year-to-year comparison by department. So again, you can look across. The purple is for 15-16 estimated year end. The blue is for 16-17. So you can see across the board, the departments really are not changing their budgets too much from last year, this current year's budget. The expenditures by department, so general fund expenditures is $2.6 million. So here you can see the breakdown percentage by department. So I won't bore you with reading the details of that. And on to revenues. So the revenue assumptions that we did make for this year is a property tax increase of 3%. Sales tax, we have an overall decrease of 1% in sales tax. While Muni Services is projecting an increase in sales tax because of the sunset of the triple flip, and in fiscal year 15-16, so this current year, we did receive a one-time true-up payment, which increased our sales tax numbers for this fiscal year, so that's why it's showing an overall decrease of 1%. TOT increase is 1% is what we're projecting, plus we added a little bit in for a partial year with Los Alcobas, and if they do come online earlier than we've projected and we see that they're bringing it, like TOT, more TOT is coming in, we'll definitely bring it back to council for a budget adjustment. So revenue for the general fund comes from several sources. So our property, our sales tax, and our TOT. It also includes business license tax, motor vehicle fees, and motor vehicle license fees and in lieu fees, and building and planning revenue. So our general fund revenue estimates are the $10.591 million. So there is a $50,000 difference, if you notice, between the revenues and the expenses, and that is the $50,000 that the City Council authorized that we take from general fund reserves to fund the capital fund for the flood project. So you'll see our overall revenues, property sales, TOT bring in the majority of the revenues, residuals, business license, motor vehicle, building and planning, and then other revenues. These are summaries for each of the property or each of the taxes that are brought in. So what you want to look at is the actuals for traditional or historically over the years to what is being proposed. So you can see property tax, we have a slight increase from last year. Sales tax, a slight decrease, it's at 1%. TOT is a slight increase. Business license remains rather flat. Motor vehicle license fees remain relatively flat. Building and planning is a slight decrease. The only reason for the decrease this year, it has to do with the short-term rental permits. We have 25 short-term rentals that we allow. They are renewed every 2 years, so this cycle, I believe we only have 4 that are renewing for this upcoming fiscal year. So that's what the difference is in the fees. The water enterprise funds, you can see our revenue, we are proposing a decrease. That is primarily due to the 25% mandated water reductions. Wastewater, there is a decrease. That is also related to the 25% reduction, although it's not a 25% reduction on wastewater because that's based on the winter average. So by and far, people usually use less water during the winter months when they don't have to water their landscaping. And so that's why you don't notice as much of the decrease in the water revenues. The revenues for fund type, so you'll see general fund, it's only a slight increase of approximately $42,000, so it's essentially a 0% change. Water fund, it's a decrease of 21% from last year, and then wastewater is a decrease of 7%. One of the budget assumptions for this year's budget was our state revolving fund. So our budget is based on the SRF, based on SRF accepting the terms of the proposed repayment schedule that the City Council directed staff to start working with SRF. We still do not have any final information from SRF. We are still working with them. We have been in contact with them. They're looking over financials. They're looking, they have to do what they do on their side. So this budget is based on that, which means that part of the SRF repayment schedule that we proposed to them was I believe it was a $75,000 for the first year. I'd have to go check my notes on that. So our final budget summaries, what do all these numbers in this book mean? So our estimated general fund reserves as of the end of this fiscal year is a little over $2.3 million. Our revenues, $2.591 million. Our expenses, $10.6 million. So that means it's a deficit to the general fund of $50,000, and that is for the establishment of that capital fund for as a requirement of the SRF loan. That will leave our estimated reserves at $2.313 million, which is again at 22%. Our water fund, our estimated water unrestricted net position at 6/30/16 is $4.9 million. There are 2 slides for the water and wastewater, and if you recall from the May 4th meeting, that has to do with our GASB 68 requirements, reporting pension liabilities. This is something new for all cities. All cities, at this point, they don't know how they actually want to project this in the net position chart, so we're presenting it both ways just so you're aware. So we have our total revenues of $3.7 million, total expenses of $5.1 million. Our expenses are $1.3 million over our revenues, and again, that is just for straight operating for our water fund. Use of water cash is $1.3 million. Estimated water net position at the end of next fiscal year is $3.5 million, which is 70%. And again, this does not account for any large capital improvement projects. This shows the same chart with the net pension liability. So you'll see the estimated restricted net position or unrestricted net position changes down to $3.6 million. So what this does, the revenues and expenses are identical. It brings the estimated water net position down to $2.3 million, which is 46% of the estimated expenses. So it definitely makes a difference with how it's reported now. The wastewater fund, this is going to start the year in a deficit, as City Manager Phillips explained. So the total revenues for water fund is $2.1 million, total expenses a little over $2 million. Our expenses aren't as high as our revenues, so we will have an excess of only $52,000 this year. We aren't going to have to use any wastewater cash because we don't have any, so that's good. The unrestricted net position is at a deficit of $27,000, which means it's at a negative 1%, so definitely an unacceptable place to be. If you look at the wastewater fund with the net pension liabilities, you can see the beginning balance drops to a deficit of almost $1 million. So then after our estimated 16-17, it's a little about $900,000 as a deficit, or a deficit of 42%. So our long-range financial forecast, this is the same chart that we had at the May 4th meeting. So this is our baseline if everything goes according to plan, our projections are correct, SRF accepts the terms of our agreement. You can see we're still not in a strong financial position, and according to the SRF terms that we proposed, it means starting in fiscal year 2021 and 22, that's when we'd have to pay the remainder of the SRF loan from general fund, and so you can definitely see the full amount of the payment. You can see the drop in what our estimated reserves would be. This is if there is a mild recession in place, so you can see it makes it even look a little worse. And then in those same years where we have to do the full SRF payment, it does bring us into a deficit for those 3 years. As City Manager Phillips spoke about earlier, our current budget does not put the substantial amount of any substantial amount of money into capital assets. This is what our long-range financial forecast would look like if we actually did put an appropriate amount into capital assets. So you can see we definitely cannot operate under that capacity. So I'm going to move on to staffing summary. So that's an overview for all the departments. Staffing summary is percentages for our full-time equivalents. City Manager's office has 7%, finance is 7%, building and planning is 4%, public safety is 25%. Library is 11%, recreation is 9%, public works admin is 8%, parks, building, street maintenance is 14%, utilities is 14%. And now we're going to move on to the department budgets. For City Council, you can see the salary and the summary of the expenses and salary benefits, capital equipment, communications. So you do see there's only a slight increase from what the adopted budget was to your estimated year into the proposed. There's slight increases. The increases are primarily in the benefits, and again, that goes back to the increase that we had in our Anthem Blue Cross or Anthem Kaiser medical dental. Our summary is general fund for City Council is $172,000. Water fund is $24,000, and wastewater is $24,000. City Council unmet needs. So there is the unmet need of the other half of the funding for the nonprofit applications. City Council did approve the 50% of the funding, so the other portion is still going unfunded. For City Manager's office, the structure of the City Manager's office, we have our City Manager. Under her is our Human Resources IT Director, who also has an Administrative Services Manager. And then we also have our City Clerk and then our Office Assistant, which is split between planning. The City Manager's budget did not change from the proposed budget on May 4th. So again, you can see the difference from the estimated year end of $910,000 to $964,000. There is a difference between what the adopted budget and the estimated year end. A lot of that had to do with staffing getting changed around between different departments, some unexpected expenses. The contracts did go up quite a bit, and part of that was Kaizen, which is helping us get our information online and transparent and organized and available, as well as the polling. A contract came in a lot higher than we originally anticipated, so City Council approved an increase in that budget. And then salary and benefits is the same as the other departments across the board. So City Manager, where the money comes from for City Manager's general fund is $661,000. Water and wastewater are right around $151,000 each. Unfunded items within the City Manager's office is under HR. NeoGov is an application that we would really, really like to get. Most other governments are on it. We are behind the times on this. It does run just a little over $23,000. What this is it's an application onboarding and performance review portal. So everything is done a lot more efficiently, a lot more effectively within the HR department. For IT unfunded items is a new website, which the estimated cost is $125,000, and also a regular computer replacement equipment fund. Right now, computers are being replaced as needed, so basically when they are no longer functioning anymore, that's when we replace them, as opposed to getting them on a regular replacement cycle. City Clerk unfunded items is ECS, which is a Laserfish, which would allow greater public access. It's a web portal for their City Clerk, which is just about $32,000. There's also meeting manager software, which would be incorporated into a city clerk transparency webpage. That would be $6,000. Public Records Act request tracking software, boards, commissions, and committees management software, and a records coordinator. So these are all items that would be extremely helpful, I know, to the city clerk's office, to the city manager's office, even to the city council and to the public, just being more transparent, open, giving the public more access to our records, and unfortunately we were unable to fund them this year. For the finance department, does anybody have any questions for city council or city managers?
Say that again?
Any questions for those two departments?
Well, I do have a question.
Okay.
That is, with respect to the Public Records Act request tracking software, does that permit you to list the Public Records Act requests as they come in so that the public can see them immediately as they come in? Because one thing I get a sense of is that our cities is getting overwhelmed with these PRA requests. It's chewing into staff time, and perhaps if they were public, folks that make these requests would at least think a little bit about the impact on the city, and other residents could see who is requesting what.
I do not know.
Maybe it sound a little severe because I deeply believe in public records and being able to respond to it, but at some point, it's also, my sense of it is just becoming overwhelming for us.
From talking to our city clerk, I do not know if that access is available online for, it is, okay. The answer is yes. And then what it also, I know after talking to our city clerk, what it will do is allow for the city clerk's office to review those requests that have already been done. All the information's already there. They can forward the information out as opposed to having to refine the information.
And this is just a $6,000 item, or included in a $6,000 package?
I believe so.
All right.
One time or annual? It's an annual expense?
That I do not know. I do not know if it's an annual expense or if it's a one-time.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No, I mean, on that one, I'm quite happy to take the position that the city should go ahead and do it. And if it comes out of reserves, it comes out of reserves, but I see that as a cost saving too. It just caught my ear on that one.
Okay. So moving on to finance. So in my department, it's myself. I have an accounting technician, I have 2 accounting assistants, and I have a grant manager and finance manager. For my budget summary, there was only one slight change in my budget from the proposed, from the May 4th until the June 14th, and that was an error in the calculation for, it was banking transaction fees, so I believe the increase on it, and it's outlined in the budget, or in my staff report. I believe it was about a $2,000 increase, so there's one slight change. I did actually have an overall decrease in my budget, but that did have to do with the administrative services manager moving into the city manager's office 75%, my office 25%, and then realigning some of the positions, as well as I did have a decrease in my contracts, and that was primarily due to I had the rate study, the development impact fee study, and then also the forensic accountant added in this year's budget, and it's not in next year's budget. So for my department, the general fund funds $352,000. The water fund is $250,000, and the wastewater is $204,000. Unfunded items in my department is a CIP audit. Currently, we are working with Public Works Director Palmer on basically going through our CIPs, our projects, finding out exactly where we are with those funds because it wasn't necessarily tracked the best before, and so we are currently working on that the best we can. We would love to be able to bring in a whole new person just to be able to fund that, and it's just not a possibility at this time. We would like to update our utility billing meters, which would be about $500,000 to do that. We would like to integrate a business license payments online, and unfortunately we're unable to do that as well. We'd like to do month-end reconciliation of all accounts, and then we'd also like to integrate the budgeting process with the financial software. And again, just because of financial constraints this year, these are things that we are not going to be able to add to the budget. Any questions for finance budget?
What is the non-departmental segment of our
Non-departmental is a separate budget, so that comes after planning. I will present that part of the budget.
But so your department is not allocated a certain amount for finance, or
We're allocated a certain percent based on our job function between general fund water and wastewater. So you have your utility billing person who basically takes in all the payments, handles things that are primarily water, wastewater. So that position is fully dedicated. It's split between water and wastewater. My position is split between the 3 different funds. Is that?
yes.
Okay. Yeah, so it is based on time allocation.
I think so. I'm not entirely sure I have a question. I think that the finance director obviously has some responsibilities over non-departmental.
Right, that's correct.
Where does that
Oh.
fit, I guess, into the budget?
Much of it is the debt. So much of the non-departmental is the debt service, and so she oversees all of the debt that we have for the city. Yes.
Thank you. And I'm going to pass this over to our planning director, Noah Hausch.
Thank you, Director Mitz. As mentioned, this is the Planning and Community Improvement Department. It's essentially planning services, building services, code enforcement, and management of the Housing Authority. We have 4 employees, 4.5 full-time employees. Myself as the director, Zinnia Gamero as our admin assistant, filling in tonight for city clerk. Senior planner Aaron Heacock, building technician Jim Kerrigan, and building official Daryl Mays. This is the actual breakdown of the budget. Some generalities, but essentially you'll see an increase in the salary and benefits portion related to hiring of Daryl as the building official. Previously, he was a contract employee, and also hiring of Zinnia Gamero as a half-time admin for our department. Kind of in relation to that, you'll see there's a fairly significant reduction in the contract services of $80,000, which is a savings of bringing Daryl into the department as a full-time employee. We still are relying on consultants to assist with planning services. You're well aware of a lot of the projects we're working on. The general plan is being managed by a consultant, Victor Carniglia. General plan EIR is being assisted by Jerry Haig. And I'm anticipating to have some fairly decent-sized projects that will probably be managed by Victor moving forward through the year. You'll see some notes deeper into the budget that identify some of the anticipated budget for consultant services are covered directly by the projects that they're working on. The general plan is obviously not one of those, but if there are project-related management by a consultant, those will be pass-through costs. So the department, it's included in the budget, but it's not a direct hit to the general fund. In addition, we still do have a contract with Interwest Services to rely on outside plan check services as needed for the building department to keep things, to keep to our schedules and the time commitments that we have made to our applicants, and also to assist in case Daryl's out sick or needs a vacation, then we can supplement the building inspection services as well through Interwest. As you're well aware of, we have a number of commitments. The general plan, obviously, general plan EIR, and then following that will be the zoning code update, comprehensive update to implement the changes to the general plan, design guidelines, and these are all commitments that we've made in addition to the day-to-day activities of managing the department, processing development applications, doing building inspections, etc. So you'll see that the total planning budget proposed is $976,000 and some change. There's further details and breakdowns of all of those expenses. I have included some additional costs associated with just cell phones, training, those types of things related to having a couple more staff members. But generally, it is a flat budget as described by City Manager Phillips and Finance Director Mitz. And then this leaves a number of kind of the unfunded items that we've talked about in the budget workshop. Obviously, as I mentioned, we've committed to creating and implementing design guidelines. That's in the housing element. That's in numerous places. However, there's no funding associated with how that'll be done. ongoing issue is just responding to code enforcement complaints. As I mentioned, it's complaint driven, but we have no dedicated budget to that. So essentially staff has to fit that into our workloads and prioritize the complaints and responses to them as we're able. A planning technician obviously would be a huge asset to the department. Just as I mentioned in the budget workshop, a lot of the work we do, we cannot recoup the cost for, just what's my zoning, what's the permit history of my property, those types of things, which are day-to-day questions that we also answer. And we don't charge any services or any fees for that. Right now, those questions, frankly, I answer those questions as a director, as does every other member of the staff. And so having a technician to kind of take care of some of the day-to-day counter work would be huge, a huge asset to the department, but it's just not an option with the fiscal climate that we're in. Obviously, doing some supporting efforts to City Manager Phillips and the other departments to pursue economic development efforts would be a huge benefit as well. But again, it's not really something that we have any funding for. And then proactive pursuit of affordable housing. As mentioned, in earlier presentations, we do work hard to support the affordable housing and essentially housing needs in general in the city. Everyone is aware of the housing challenges facing our community and, frankly, the state. And we just don't have any resources to proactively pursue those. However, I am very proud of the work that we're doing to try to meet the obligations that the city has and commitments we've made. So that essentially wraps up my presentation of our budget. I'm happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Do a lot of work with very few people. That's about all I can say.
Thank you.
I'm trying to think back to the time when I was on the planning commission, but my belief is that the planning department had more staff back then than you have today, and it still was pressed.
My staff is very, very excellent. We get a lot of support from other departments, so it's definitely a team effort.
Busy when you were on it because it was more of a
Economic downturn? Yeah, they were busy enough. All right. City Attorney.
Yes.
Oh, is that where we are?
Yes, we are at City Attorney, so I will present for City Attorney. So this budget is one of the budgets that was decreased per the council directive at the May 4th meeting. So per council directive, it was decreased by $35,050 to fund 50% of the nonprofits, as well as to use whatever was going to be the deficit for the general fund reserves to take it from the city from the city attorney budget. So you can see the adopted budget for 15-16 was $702,000. The estimated year-end is $910,000. The difference on that did have to do with wastewater attorney fees. And then the proposed budget for 16-17 is at $642,000. The city attorney budget broken down by fund. We have our general fund is $582,000, water and wastewater is $15,000, and affordable housing is $30,000. So on to non-departmental, unless there's any questions for city attorney.
What was the general fund expense for the city attorney in the current fiscal year? Do you have that there?
Yes, I can look it up for you. General fund for the current fiscal year was $670,000 for the adopted.
All right.
So you can see a decrease. It was 670 was the adopted, and then it's 582 for this fiscal year.
Right. And city attorney expense is very difficult to project, that's for sure.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Okay, so on to non-departmental. So again,
I'm wondering, are we taking into account the work that will be needed supposedly on the fee increases and that whole area of law that we'll need to review? Is that
yes.
Considered in the water portion of the attorney's
Yes, it is.
budget and wastewater?
Yes.
Seems low, but okay.
No,
All right.
we verified with the office, and based on their other experience, they felt that that would be adequate.
Okay.
Well, I would only comment that if it is perceived to be low, when we get to a discussion of the rate increases, they get built up by projected expenses, so it may be there that we're going to need to take a close look at projected attorney expense.
Non-departmental. So this is the area that it's, as stated earlier, it is our debt service is paid out of the non-departmental department, as well as those miscellaneous things that benefit every department within City Hall, and it's very, very hard to basically pinpoint it to one particular department, so that's what falls into non-departmental. The budget for non-departmental is based on SRF accepting the terms of the proposed repayment schedule, because that does deal with our debt service. The non-departmental budget, so you do see a slight increase from the adopted as well as the estimated and the proposed. And those are primarily due to the SRF payment from Measure A. So if you look to the debt service, the debt payments, you'll see there's a very large increase in debt payments from 2.29 million to 3.10 million. So that is based on our estimated drawdown that we'll be able to do from Measure A to pay to the SRF agreement. So that's what the biggest difference is in this budget. And then for non-departmental, broken down by fund, we have our general fund, which is 1.2 million. Measure A is 1.3 million. Again, that is dependent on the drawdown for Measure A, and that money will be turned right over to SRF to make the payments for our SRF agreement. Tourism Improvement District is 352,000, and that's based off of occupancy. Our 1996 GO bonds, this is for the fire station bond. I'm very happy to say this is our final bond payment. So this one will actually go away. Water fund is 1.1 million, wastewater is 388,000, and then affordable housing is $1,000. So the total for non-departmental is 4.6 million.
What are the largest expenditures for the Tourism Improvement District? Where does that money go in the large figures?
The Tourism Improvement District, what that is, it was passed, I believe, by the County of Napa. I'm still a little...
Each jurisdiction, the hotel owners voted to pass it.
No, I understand what it is. I'm well aware of what it is. I don't know what we spend it on.
Well, it's a pass-through. So we collect the money as we collect the TOT and the TID, and then we pass it through. A portion of it goes to the County of Napa, and portion of it goes to our local TID. So we would have to pull the TID
No, that's fine.
records.
It's just, we get a much smaller amount.
We don't get to, we have one, I sit on that board, Jennifer attends the meeting, but sorry, the money is directed, the money is collected from hotel guests. It's an add-on to the hotel tax. So we don't get to decide what it's spent on. I mean, we have input, but it's directed. It must be spent on putting heads in beds. Is the term they use.
Yeah, I understand roughly what it's for. I just wanted clarification
well,
for the public.
what are the
public
kind of things?
assumes that we have this money to spend, and it's not that simple, obviously. That's
No,
the
we
point
don't
I'm
have
making.
any of that money to spend.
Right.
It is, as April said, a pass-through. So,
Thank you. That's fine.
but some of the things that they do spend money on are, they do some funding for the Chamber's website that directs people to hotel rooms. They give some money to the Vine Trail. They gave some money to the film festival, things like that.
Correct. I don't believe it's going to the County of Napa. It's going to
Visit Napa Valley.
Visit
Yes,
Napa
yes.
Valley. But it's all controlled by the internal documents, and we're just basically a collecting agent.
That is correct. Okay, now I would like to pass this on to our library director.
Hello again. Okay. As you can see from the chart, the library consists of 6 full-time staff and 8 part-time who currently work from 4 to 16 hours a week. In the coming fiscal year, there will be 7 less hours of part-time help per week, and those lost hours will be covered by full-time staff, including your library director. I'm ready for the next slide. Oh, thank you. Friends and Foundation is graciously funding $90,000 for part-time staff. Unfortunately, the additional $10,000 that they've granted us this year does not completely cover the 14% raise that part-time staff received due to the increase in the minimum wage. Funding staff is not something that the Friends want to continue funding, but have agreed to do it again this year. I have coded some items differently than there have been in the past. Specifics can be found in the expense detail after the library's budget. The different software that we use on our public computers is coded in, or I put them under computer equipment. So the library's not getting new computer equipment. The 6,450 is actually software that our public computers use. I also, under equipment and software maintenance category, differentiate the databases that are not part of our agreement with Solano County. If you look at the individual expenses, those are Mango Languages and BrainFuse's Help Now and Job Now, which supply one-on-one tutoring and job counseling over the internet. These are enhancements that are being funded by the Ryan Fund. I didn't want to bury them under contracts with our security system and other contracts not considered enhancements to library service. And you'll also notice that that there is $30,000 less in new materials this year, and that was to reach the library's budget goal. So overall, our budget is a little bit less than last year. It did go up this year with rollovers from Friends and Foundation. We didn't spend all of our grant last year, and they were gracious enough to roll it over into 15-16. The library's 2016-17 general fund amount is a little bit less than last year, so we've kept the status quo. That's thanks to one position not being filled. The Friends and Foundation grant covers $90,000 of part-time staff, $11,000 for programs, and the rest is for library materials. And then you see the Ryan, the Martin, and the Tweed, and the Tweed is actually down from last year. Last year we had $75,000, but due to a reappraisal done on the Tweed land, our allotment went down for this year. And then finally, our unfunded items, aging computer equipment, and additional hours beyond the 45 hours a week the library will be maintaining this coming fiscal year. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Well, one question.
Okay.
That is, I think I heard correctly at the last library trustee meeting, I've been attending those, that despite the reduced hours, the attendance, at least in the last month, equaled or exceeded that in a comparable month a year ago before the hours were reduced. Is that roughly right?
Yes, we had some really well-attended events.
But, I mean,
so yes, it was more than last year, the same month last year.
Right, with reduced hours, which shows that as unfortunate it is to reduce the hours, at least our public is to some extent rallying around and understanding the new hours and taking real advantage of the library during the hours it's open, which is a good thing.
Yeah, and our average per hour has gone up.
Okay. Any other questions? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next I'd like to move on to recreation, and I'm going to ask our recreation director to present.
Good evening, everyone. As you can see from our work chart, staff chart, I have two staff. That's me as a director, and Amalia Kuzecki is the recreation supervisor. No baby yet, so we're waiting. A halftime sports assistant, Daniel Amanza. And then our seasonal staff, which we're getting ready for our training tomorrow for our day camp starting next week. And the teen center under Amalia also, we have 5 part-time staff that work just at the teen center. And we do average about 65 volunteers every year that help run our youth programs like T-ball, youth basketball, youth soccer, youth volleyball. Our next slide, as you can see again, the salary and benefits are up, minimum wage went up. Our contracts are up a little bit due to the 4th of July and after-school programming enrichment classes with the partnership with the high school, the school district. Everything else is pretty much the same as years before. The budget by fund, as you know, the general fund, the teen center. Teen center is 100% funded by the general fund. Bocce ball brings in $40,000 about every year. we have spent more money in bocce for the maintenance of the courts this year, which are looking really great, and everyone's been really, really happy. So it's a good expense. The Harvest Festival, 4th of July, which is coming in about 3 weeks, and our recreation program, which is supplemented also by the general fund. But revenues are about $120,000. The unmet needs, unfunded need, full-time recreation coordinator that would help us with some of these programs that we're not funding. I mean, we're not providing yet. There's a lot of stuff for adults that we are not doing, providing some adult basketball, volleyball. These are open gyms that the community still keeps asking for, as well as adult soccer and some of the youth stuff like youth flag football. There's a lot of it in Napa that our parents have to drive down to Napa for. Also some summer activities for the teens with the staff. I cannot provide in being 3 places at one time. So that is, we're unable to do that for the past 2 years. And that's kind of it.
All right, any questions? I must say I've received lots of compliments, which of course I personally accepted with respect to the bocce courts. But I also discovered that Mel, who oversees that,
It's on your team.
was on my team. So, perfect.
They're doing a great job and
Yeah, it's
keeping
wonderful.
the people happy. So.
Yeah, great job. All right.
Did we previously, when I get the flyers for, I said this before, for the camps, I'm very impressed. I've sort of watched them over time. I've always focused on, just like the summer camp flyer, and I've focused on the camps for my kids who are younger. But have we historically had teen summer camps?
Oh yeah, when I first started here, Splash Camp, I had 30 kids a day.
Okay.
It was very successful.
Okay.
Yeah.
For the past 2 years, that has been.
It's a little hard with staffing. Plus, also some of the teens are looking for something else also. We're trying to capture that also. They're going to some bigger camps like Stanford or in Berkeley. They're looking for, or overnight camps as well, they're looking for. Also, a lot of teenagers feel safe in town, so their parents feel like, you know, they can roam around a little bit. So we do have to be a little bit more creative in that sense to provide more outings for the teens. We did a really good job last year providing a week-long outing trip for the whole week, and that is something we sold out. But that was Molly and I on every day gone for a week. And so that's one reason I can't do that, and I wish we can do it at least a couple of weeks during the summer. But that's something where they're looking is to get out of town, the kids are. So we need to be very creative into looking around for fun events around the city, you know, Oakland or Berkeley.
Because you used to go to Marine World.
Yep.
The Splash Camp used to go to Marine World, and
That's where I first started.
yeah, it concerns me a little bit just because that's a very sort of
Yeah.
fragile age where kids can take one path or another path, and if they have some positive, productive things to do, sometimes they take a better path. But
I wonder if there's a way to work with, if staffing's the issue, to actually, and maybe it can't be a college student, but some, a senior in college that lives in St. Helena, comes here for the summer, that works with you to help make it happen for these teen outings. Because the reason they're not happening now is the staffing issue, right? Specifically, there's only so many bodies to oversee and chaperone. Or I wonder if there are volunteer parents in the community that could help get those back online.
But then we have issues driving the vans with volunteer parents, and so we just need a little bit more staffing. But we put our efforts towards our Adventure Day camp, which I need with my staffing to make it really successful. And last year I had 40 kids a day. We were sold out. We had a waiting list, and we already have more than 30 kids a day so far in our weeks at Adventure Day camp. So that K through 5, which we put effort, when we put effort in, we can do it,
Right.
which I'm really proud of. So we just need to go back to some of those old days that we put a lot of effort in the teens, but we need some more funding, some more staff.
well, you do a great job for a small amount of staff.
Is the teen center open through the summer?
No,
No. Okay.
Amaya Kuzeki is on maternity leave for
Okay.
the summer.
Otherwise, it would.
We would try to do something, but she needs some more staff for the summer.
Okay.
So.
Thanks.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, next I'm going to have our fire chief present his budget.
Good evening. So here's the staff of the firehouse. Fire Marshal is Jim Capone. Sean Aspey is our First Assistant Chief. Allison Mattioli is our Management Analyst. And Adam Waters is our Second Assistant Chief. And we have 6 captains under the 2 Assistant Chiefs that are in charge of training, safety, equipment, maintenance. Here's the budget. Most like the other departments, we had the firefighters were paid per call firefighters, then they transitioned to part-time employees. So the contract in the middle there, the contracts was $256,000, and it got moved over to the salary, which was $81,000, and now it's $372. And workers' comp is up, and benefits is up because that's where all the Social Security comes out of. And the entire fund comes from the general fund. And unfunded items is especially the fire marshal needs to go up at least one more day. He's 1 day a week right now. He can barely keep up with just the plan check. And that means that that going out into the field and doing inspections is very few. So we need to get that back up to the levels that we need to be. And the repairs of the firehouse is 20 years old. It's nice to see the bond come off the roll. So, but with that, things are starting to.
You're going to find a replacement cost quickly.
Yeah. So we have replacement doors. Those things are falling apart. Our HVAC is 20 years old. We're trying to keep it together. And then the refrigerator freezer is always having a problem. So that's where we stand.
You have a lot of duct tape and welders.
We do. There was some guy in the attic for a day fixing it yesterday, so we those are the unfunded items. But the firehouse is in really good shape.
Yeah.
Has good roof on it, good foundation, good solid. It was well built for sure. And I wrote down in here, Kroll and Pitts, the lobster feed is March 25th. So you can put that. 'Cause I know that's your number one question when I come up here. The first Tuesday in February. Okay.
And that's your last reminder.
Right.
Let me ask you this question in terms of in terms of staffing. Are you short firefighters? Are you fully staffed at this point?
We're down to 24,
and
fully would be 30.
So you're down 6.
Yes, we lost 3 in a month. Just so happens, one moved away, one got a job, and one retired with more than 30 years in. And it just happened just like that.
And do you anticipate any difficulty in recruiting a new 6? Are there issues here in terms of finding good replacements?
Housing, number one.
And
you have to live here to be on to make any, to be on the fire department and make a difference. So you have to live close by because we want that engine out within. It'd be nice if it's 3 to 5 minutes.
Okay, I mean, I'm thinking about this as I look at you, but it seems to me that this could be.
I haven't blinked yet.
This could be a significant issue for you, and you could be coming back to us, potentially seeking some form of subsidy or housing aid or whatever, because very clearly we want to keep this model going if we can.
That's right. The department, the association, purchased 2 duplexes on one property on Tainer Street, and we call it the barracks. And I don't know where this department would be without that. There's 5 firefighters housed over there right now.
Right.
They're all 2-bedroom, and there's a couple brothers that live in one, but it worked out pretty well. And we really count on that quick response. It's practically an engine company that's across across the street down Tainer. So that really works out well.
Okay, right, yeah,
The alternative is way more expensive.
correct.
Yes, for $769.
How long would it take to train the 5 of us up?
That would be a deficit.
Maybe a couple years.
Yes.
Get you on the engine.
Just so the council knows, the chief and I have been talking about the housing challenges, and that's going to need to be part of the conversation as we look forward. If this is a model that the city would like to keep and we highly value, and quite frankly saves a tremendous amount of money for the organization, for the community, we've talked about housing and are starting to look at some potential options in collaboration with the association. And would there be some opportunities to partner for some housing for the firefighters?
Is affordable housing funds are they available for something like this or not? Or it's a gray area?
That's probably a gray area. It would be something I'd have to look into. But we've talked about things like maybe the railroad property, and as we talk to potential developers, would there be an opportunity to include some firefighter housing? Because it is, the mayor's absolutely correct, which is why the fire chief and I have been discussing this, is it's absolutely critical to the model, for the model to continue moving forward. We're going to have some sort of housing options to have people here within 3 to 5 minutes to be able to respond. And so
Chief
it's a
Sorensen,
critical component.
Sorry. If this were not this model and were a full-time staffed fire department, how much more would that cost?
Oh,
Ballpark.
You could just look at the police department
That's what I was.
and then take away the dispatchers and maybe the CFOs, because you wouldn't have that in there. So be pretty close. There's a chief, and Gunny, you have 2 on duty or 3 on duty? Supposed to be 3. Yeah, so that'd be a 3-person engine company. So
like 2.5 million more.
yeah, this model is more cost effective.
That could pay.
We got to find the money for the housing.
That could pay for a lot of mortgage.
And it's every year.
Yeah,
You know?
Right.
yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Well, I can't tell you how appreciative we all are for the work you do and your people do. It's
Well,
terrific.
the firefighters are very dedicated.
Yeah,
I'll
they
tell
are.
you, it's
Absolutely.
the best group. We have the best group.
Well, I'm sure we're going to hear from the police officer.
Oh, yeah.
Perhaps a little competition here.
All right. Okay.
Thank you
Thank
very much.
you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
So on to police. Unfortunately, our chief could not be here tonight, so I'm going to be doing his presentation. And he wouldn't give me the badge. I tried, and he just wouldn't give it to me. But Sergeant Hartley is here to answer any questions as far as specifics for their portion of the budget. So police, for starting in fiscal year 16-17, is the chief, 1 lieutenant, 4 dispatchers, 2 sergeants, a community service officer, which is 3/4 time, a corporal, and 7 officers. So it's the same amount of staff as the 15-16, the current year budget. For the summary for the police department, you'll see the primary increases in salary and benefits. And as stated at the beginning of the presentation, POA is part of the Police Officers Association is part of their bargaining, their MOU. It was a 4.5% increase in salary, as well as the dispatchers was a 3.5% increase. The other increase that you can see is in the contract services. It started out as a little under 107,000, was increased to 109,000, and then this next year's budget is proposed 121,000. The primary difference is that there were several things that were always included in previous budgets, and they got left off of last year's budget. So we are just putting those back in like they should be. The police department, primarily funded by general fund, so a little over $3 million for general fund. Public safety, or the COPS program, is for next year's budget is $131,000. They typically bring in about $100,000 every year for that program. We do have some residuals in that fund, and so he is increasing the budget next year to $131,000. Training development fund is $6,000, and then asset forfeiture fund is $1,000. So total for police department is $3.2 million. Police unfunded items is one item was an additional officer. If this officer was brought on, they would serve as a school resource / youth services person, staff member, and an investigator as well. As the chief had mentioned, I believe it was at the May 4th workshop, is that there was an investigation that took place, and it took 3 of our officers out of state to actually conduct the investigation. And it was something they didn't have a choice to do, but all of a sudden, in one shot, you have 3 people that are now taken out of service to be able to do an investigation, and that was in a different state. The other item that is not funded is a neighborhood watch program, an internal procedures update, an emergency preparedness program, enhanced animal care and control, and then a records manager and / dispatch supervisor, which would be just about $100,000 for salary and benefits. And myself or Sergeant Hartley would be glad to answer any questions.
Well, I've got one.
Okay.
You mentioned a school resource officer. Is it typical that such an officer would be funded through the school system for the time the officer spends in the school? If it's a half-time position, half salary charged to the school system?
I'm going to
I can
divert to
answer
Sergeant
that question
Hartley.
for you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Sergeant.
Typically, the school will pay 50% of that salary, and we pick up the other 50%. However, that is the officer's full-time position. The local schools have neglected, with the recession, the schools have elected not to fund that position, not to fund their 50% portion.
That's about all I can say is that's disappointing. You know, the finance director mentioned the property tax. The city captures only 16% of the property tax here. The school system captures far more, and that's part of the problem that we have in terms of funding the city is we get too little of the property tax. So I would hope there could be a conversation, quite frankly, between the city manager and the superintendent on this one.
I have a question on the records management and dispatch unfunded need. In a community this size, I want to understand how dispatch works right now, and is there really a need for a dispatch manager? And can does the police department rely on, the records management that we're building, right, our system, or could they, right, to not have to bear that additional expense? So it's sort of a question, I think, to both of you.
To kind of make sure I understand your question, is your question, can we use the city's other resources to do our records management instead of doing it internally?
Correct.
With classified and sensitive material, it needs to be a sworn person in there that handles, all the criminal complaints and all the requests that come in for copies of those, so on and so forth. Along with the internal procedures stuff, that covers our standing operating procedures. Somebody needs to go through all that stuff. It hasn't been touched in years, and it needs to be redone, along with a lot of our policy issues. Policies change all the time, and not having somebody to help, we're constantly backlogged.
Okay. And then on dispatch?
Correct. We have 4 dispatchers that work full-time.
Okay.
All right, and that's 2 on per day, 2 off per day. To get one as a full-time records coordinator, we just couldn't do it and be able to man the desk and take the calls.
Okay.
For managing, right now, the lieutenant manages the assignment would go to the lieutenant. The lieutenant's been vacant as a cost-saving measure this past year. So that was one of the things we did to balance the 15-16 budget is Bill was promoted to be chief. That lieutenant position stayed vacant. And so once the lieutenant position is filled for the 16-17 budget, the lieutenant is then is the supervisor of the dispatch. But the lieutenant isn't a dispatcher. And so for sworn officers to manage dispatch, there's often a disconnect between they're not trained dispatchers, and so to be able to provide the guidance and the training that the dispatchers need, it can work, but it's not ideal. And so when we talk about someone that could come in and do the records management and then would also not just records management, we looked at that they could supervise dispatch. That would be a great combination. And that was one of the things that Bill had asked for in this budget, the chief had asked for in this budget, and we weren't able to fund.
And we'd also have, when things come up, we'd have another body that understands and knows dispatch, which
Correct.
we don't
So-
have right now.
So when we had one of our dispatchers out on extended leave, we really struggled, and we had to ask Calistoga for some assistance. And we brought someone back who had left, and we paid them on extra help time. And so it's a real challenge. So we are literally staffed to exactly the capacity that we need. And whenever there's a shortfall in staffing, it's very difficult. So that too would also provide another person to be backup in case someone is out. That's correct.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Officer Hartley.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm going to now turn it over to Director Palmer.
Okay.
Thank you. My presentation is split into three basic divisions. We've got operations, which is basically everything except water and wastewater. So I separated water and wastewater, talk about them a little separately, and everything else we've lumped into operations. Go to the next. For the whole department, this is a snapshot of the org chart as it stands now. This is the same that we presented with the workshop in May. We've got 24 full-time equivalents in the department, and there's a number of vacancies right now. We can go to the next one. So the operations budget overall, as Director Mitz mentioned earlier, there were some increases in salary and benefits as a result of labor negotiations, so those are reflected here as increases. The other one I wanted to point out that's gone up is contracts, and that's there's another detailed summary farther back in the document about what those contracts are specifically. The highest dollar value one is an engineering analysis of the disinfection byproduct formation up at the Lewis-Strawley water treatment plant. We're not running into significant issues yet with being able to meet compliance, but it's slowly creeping up into the realm of starting to cause some worry that we need to make sure we're complying. And not to mention the OEL limits and the program that's run by the state. Those, as a phased approach, it gets more stringent over time, and we're starting to get into the later years of implementation, so they're starting to get a little more strict with us on our reporting requirements. So it's something that we need to address this year. We'll go to the next one. The summary of budget by fund. You'll notice there are water and wastewater activities in here. That is primarily the PW admin portion of. So while water and wastewater operations are funded out of another division in the budget, the activities that are managed and run by the staff at City Hall, myself and Tobias Barr, and Carlos at the manager level, those programs are funded out of through the PW admin budget. They're funded water fund, wastewater fund through the general operations budget. So things like that disinfection byproduct study are listed, included in those costs. You can go on the next one. Again, the list of unfunded items for operations that we presented on May 4th. You'll notice these are proactive type applications, proactive activities that we're unable to work on right now. Asset management is critically important, and I believe in asset management and having a master plan for all our facilities. And there's no money been set aside for those things, so we're unable to make any progress on them yet. You can go to the next one. I believe City Manager Phillips mentioned these items a little bit in her presentation at the beginning. The government buildings, when you really need to do a complete building assessment, have some master planning. I talked about Carnegie Building a little on May 4th. There's just a tremendous need to keep the buildings maintained, and we don't have a good handle on that right now. We're being very reactive and addressing things as they break. The fire chief talked about having someone up in his attic work on the HVAC the last couple of days. That's the kind of reactive mode we're in. Those were our contractor up there trying to get that system working correctly again. And government buildings more. Government buildings, we got City Hall and having a capital replacement fund. City Hall, I hear chuckles around me here. No, we don't know all that's wrong with them. We can see haven't done a detailed assessment. That's kind of the point of it is unfunded, is we haven't done a detailed assessment. These are some items that I've noticed and is brought to my attention in my term here that needs to be addressed, that we don't have money to address, and then we haven't done a lot of investigations to figure out what else needs to be done there.
What about the police department? Is that
That would be included in the city hall.
City Hall? Okay.
Again, parks, just being more proactive in our maintenance instead of responding. Trying to be proactive with replacing sidewalks, replacing equipment, replacing benches and picnic tables and such. And then for garage, we have a need for a vehicle replacement fund. There's no sinking fund. There's no set-asides every year to make sure we have enough to replace the vehicle when it's reached its end of useful life. So we're budgeting for those things one at a time. As things break, we budget for an operations budget. So we're not setting aside money in a reserve fund somewhere that we can draw from as needed. That was pretty much it for operations. Do you have any questions about those type of things before I move on to water and wastewater? I'm seeing. I'll move on.
Go ahead.
I'll move on then.
Yeah. We'll open up to public comment briefly at the end.
So water, a couple increases there I wanted to point out was capital equipment and then chemicals. My notes are back in the back here. For capital equipment, and as an attempt to deal with the fact we don't have a capital replacement fund or a sinking fund, we budgeted some money this year for a variable frequency drive emergency replacement. So these are the components that control pumps. So variable speed pumps have a controller that goes along with them. So we budgeted some money for that, as we don't have one that needs to be replaced yet that we know of, but they're of that age where they're starting to go bad and need to be replaced. So we just proactively put some money in. But that's the kind of budgeting we're doing without a sinking fund. We know, well, something's going to happen. We think something might happen this year, so we're going to budget for it. We also have a couple valves at the water plant they need replacing, and some piping to repair and coating to do in the clear well at Lewis Australia. So those are the biggest ticket items for capital equipment. Chemical costs also went up. That's just a result of recent bid results, and quantities kind of changed a little bit over time. The next one just shows that our overall water fund budget for this year is about $3 million. Unfunded items. These are mainly, if you look at them, they're all, except the capital replacement fund, they're really capital improvement projects, which they are being evaluated right now as part of the 5-year CIP. So I'm updating the 5-year capital improvement plan. I'll bring it back for council action. The plan is for the first meeting in July, so we can get some activity in that. So some of these, I'm pointing this out now because some of these that are shown as unfunded, depending on the results of the CIP, I may bring them up and bring them up to this year, and that will mean delaying other projects. So even though I'm listing them here as unfunded, they may get funded in the CIP at the expense of something else that's lower priority. And one I'll just point out, well, the three I'll point out are the bottom three there: disinfection, byproduct removal, Bell Canyon intake tower replacement, and Dwyer Road booster station. As I mentioned, the disinfection byproduct is becoming increasingly difficult for us to meet. So we may end up spending some more money on it this year than I had originally thought. The Bell Canyon intake tower replacement, we just placed the mid-valve. We have some video back from the dive that doesn't look good. Looks like the tower is ready to be replaced now. And so that's something that I'll be addressing with this 5-year CIP when I bring it back. And then Dwyer Road booster station has actually been, I've been in communication with the city of Napa. It sounds like they're delaying that project. Calistoga wasn't able to get the financing they thought they were going to get. And so that project is they've got engineering plans done, but they're going to shelve it until they can find some more money to deliver that project. So, another point is, all these projects and unfunded items will be considered when we do a rate study. So all these cost estimates for all these projects and the planning level time frame of these projects are all being programmed in the rate study and the rate review. So we'll be trying to figure out a way to fund them.
Does the Dwyer Road booster station impact in any way the ability to move Napa water up to the city?
It doesn't. So it's about pressures, really, for us. It doesn't significantly address quantity so much. I think that's at least not the motivating factor for the project. The factor is pressures. I think it will make a little more reliable because they won't be switching back and forth down there as much. They can pump. It allows City of Napa to pump their water from State Water Project up to Jameson, Clearwell, so then it can, not Jameson, sorry, to, I'm blanking on the reservoir name, right? Hennessy. They can pump State Water Project that comes through Jameson up to Hennessy, so a little more stability in the pressures. We won't see these wide fluctuations in pressures when they switch sources. That's the benefit for us. For Calistoga, it does allow them to pump more up to the Calistoga at a higher pressure and allows them to take a pump station offline. Actually, there was a second page I missed on unfunded. You want to go one more? Oh, no, that was it. That was the one I missed? Okay. I wasn't looking at that. So there's some more projects listed that are, again, these are project-related stuff. There is an annual water main replacement program that we don't have in place now that we really need to start implementing to replace pipes before they start to fail.
On the State Water Project, right now I think Napa County has sort of like the master, and then they sublease to the City of Napa, and then also to Calistoga, and then for whatever reason, Yountville and St. Helena then subcontract with the City of Napa. Is there a reason why we didn't historically look at having a direct sort of subcontract with the county and therefore the state, but instead chose to go through the City of Napa? I figured you might know the answer to that.
Well, what I think I know, and I need to go back and refresh myself from the Napa contract, but at some point we had 1,000 acre feet of rights to Kern County water, and we gave that up, assigning it to the City of Napa in return for take-or-pay deliveries from Napa that over time increased from 200 to 400 to 600 acre feet where it stands today. So basically we gave up rights to 400 acre feet for assured delivery through all drought cycles of 600 acre feet, and I've certainly been persuaded over the years that this was a very good move on our part to bring further stability into our supply.
Okay.
But
And
at some point, our forefathers decided they didn't want to be a part of the North Bay Aqueduct. Calistoga got into that project.
Well,
St. Helena did not get into that project. Yountville did not get into that project. We get it indirectly from another way, but
Well,
that's part of the answer.
well-
I don't know what the politics were, what the financial situation was at that time.
I mean, you can go the other way and try and move the water up through the Napa system and pay a fee for doing so, but that's just not the way we went. But if you do that, then you're also going to be subjected to the allocations that then come through the State Water Project, where the allocations can go way down and impact your supply. So we traded for a considerably more reliable supply. American Canyon was really suffering last year, as you recall, because it was curtailed so much.
So we traded for less but secure.
That's right.
A smaller amount that's secure versus a larger amount that could be at risk.
That's right.
That's right.
Thank you.
Exactly. Yep. Good job.
Are you going to continue?
I was going to wastewater, but if there's more questions on water, I'm happy to answer them.
That's fine.
Okay. Wastewater. Major differences from last year. You'll see capital equipment has gone down and went up significantly from 15-16 adopted to estimated year end and then down again. That is primarily due to the El Bonito sewer payment. So we paid for the construction of El Bonito sewer that Magnolia Oaks performed. That's the range there. Contracts have gone down a little bit. This is due to, I've shifted this year the permit compliance tasks and budget from the operations side over to PW admin, because those tasks are managed out of City Hall, not at the wastewater plant by those folks. So it made more sense to put it under engineering. Equipment maintenance has gone down a bit. Just going to highlight what that one entails here for you. So it's just an estimate of what equipment we need to replace this year. We have pretty good knowledge that we do need to replace a grinder, a gearbox, and a pump out there to make sure they're just at the end of the useful life. So that's what those costs are meant for. And then you can see penalties and fines. That's the fine for the Pond 1A incident. So we don't have to pay that this year.
I must say, there's nothing that's worried me more about that facility than the grinder, because if it goes out, you can't process the effluent. And I've always admired the staff person out there that seems to keep that darn thing running and knows it inside and out and can pull it out and repair it in no time flat. But I've always thought we should have a second one there in case we lose one, just as a matter of having some backup equipment. But maybe my thinking's not right on that.
No, this does give us some redundancies now with this purchase that we're
Okay,
budgeting
good.
for next year. So that yes. Spot on. Okay. Moving on, you can see that the overall budget was $900,000 for wastewater fund. Wastewater unfunded items. Again, there's a number of these that are really capital projects that again are being evaluated as part of the 5-year CIP. Which uses money that's already been programmed and set aside. So we're not taking any new money out of operating revenues to fund any capital expenditures for the 5-year CIP. And all these will be evaluated with the rate study as well. They've all been included, and we'll evaluate how they can be funded.
My
No.
comment is at the end.
Okay, well, I'll go back real quick. The most important one there is the kind of the middle bullet, treatment plant upgrades to comply with CDO and new permit. As city manager mentioned at the very beginning, this is my number one priority. I mean, there is no other alternative. There's no option. We have to be able to discharge water. We have to treat our waste, and we have to comply with the regional board orders. And so it's my number one priority to make sure that we are doing everything we can to comply with that permit and avoid any future fines. So we're on path to complying with the schedule specified in the CDO, and I'm confident we can get there. And we'll just have to figure out how much it's going to cost and find a way to fund it eventually.
And CDO equals cease and desist order.
Cease and desist order, yes.
And that's included in the permit.
It's a separate issue issued in parallel with the permit.
Parallel with the permit. All right. I remember reading it. Okay.
Yes. So, it'll be imperative that once we have these engineering analysis done and figure out what it's going to cost to improve the plan to comply, we'll have to figure out a way to pay for it. And as city manager mentioned, that'll probably mean rate increases. We have a negative cash flow in this fund and a negative fund balance. And so there has to be money to fund this within 5 years. We have to build significant improvements to the plan within 5 years to comply with the permit.
Right. But we have significant engineering expense coming up right away.
Yes.
That's the point of it.
That's right.
Okay.
Well, I would just comment, maybe this is an unfunded item or a goal, but in this case, it's sort of the same. It seems to me that we would maybe want to have our entire city on the sewer system, as opposed to random septic systems that may or may not be failing around town. So, it seems like that would be, I always thought that was a goal of the city. So in some sense, it's a goal / unfunded item. And I'm wondering if that would be factored into the rate study.
I think right now the rate study is just based on current customers and what projections we have. Certainly, we wouldn't anyone that's an existing septic that is unable to connect, we wouldn't project them to be able to connect. And part of the issue of trying to get people to connect is having a sewer line in front of their house.
Right, I know, and like my
be able to
neighborhood is all on
connect, so,
septic, and
yeah.
everybody's septics are over 50 years old and are failing, but it's, $200,000 to bring the sewer system down the street. So instead of doing that, people are replacing their septic system, which isn't really what we want long-term for our town, right?
Right. Well, that's a policy decision of whether or not we extend those sewer lines to those residents that don't have them. Right, like a $200,000
Right, no, I'm saying
cost.
it's a policy /
absolutely.
goal / unfunded item, but it does seem like it should be an unfunded or maybe even calculated into the rate study. I don't know, because it seems like we don't, especially in areas where there's creeks and things like that, we don't necessarily want to continue on the septic system model.
Yeah, I'm not sure how we'd address that with the rates. I'll have to add to my list to talk to the consultant about whether or not how we do that. It may come down to how much can we really afford.
Right. No, I know.
Right. So but that's a great idea.
Do we have an idea of how many parcels are on septic, as opposed to?
I don't have that number.
I mean, but do we know?
We know how many connections we have,
Yeah.
and we know how many residents are in town, so it could do some math. And we have around, I want to say around
Everybody's on water.
2,600 structures.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how many connections. I'm not sure how many connections we have off the top of my head.
So
2,000.
Because there's even, I mean, some of the houses on Main Street are still on septic.
Oh, you got to be kidding.
No, it's amazing how many people are still on septic in
Yeah.
our town.
Okay. All right, are you?
it might be worth. I'm not saying to spend money on this, but a back of the envelope benefit cost analysis of getting encouraging or requiring connections where it's low cost, and then looking at neighborhoods like Sharon's, for instance, where there is proximity to creeks like York Creek, and maybe there are grant funding to get septic out of those areas, and we can help defray the cost, but look at the long-term benefit cost analysis to see what the economics look like.
Okay. Let me ask this question, and that is, can we require that a homeowner, upon the sale of his home, if the home is near a sewer line, to connect to the sewer system? Is there some way of doing
It is
that?
near.
Well, within 50 feet, 25 feet, something.
I don't know the answer to that as legally if you can do that when they're just selling the house. I know when they have a design review or something, it's a
All right, maybe
conditional
that's the way.
approval, then we can condition them to do it.
All right, well, that's,
And getting the funding, that's how a lot of sewer lines get constructed, is someone comes in with a development and we make them build a sewer line. But I think what the council is interested in here is people that are already developed, how do we get them to connect?
Right.
And that would be something new development would not be able to pay for, and the only appropriate way would be the city to fund that somehow. So I'd have to have that conversation with the rate consultant about
okay, good.
what's a good mechanism.
I
for
have a
that.
question that's related to the number of unfunded items you have, and in particular, I'm looking at page 211 of our budget. This is probably a more general question for all, and not just you, Steve, but this is the civic impact fees budget, where it shows that we have anticipated fund balance of $634,000. I guess the first question is, what are those funds to be used for, and why aren't we using them?
So I can take it. I can start April, but I don't think I can finish. Those are impact fees that were charged new development.
Understood.
And so there's a specific list of projects they can be spent on. I don't have the list here with me, so I don't really know what they are. I don't know if April knows, but I don't have it.
I do not have the list on me, and we are in the midst of doing a development impact fee study as well right now. Part of the development impact fees, we have it for civic improvement, we have it for water, wastewater, and there's public safety. I'm trying to think what they are offhand. And what happens is during the study, they identify pretty specific projects, and they'll say if a project costs $1 million, new development can be responsible for 25% of those costs. And so we're collecting the funds into these development impact fund accounts. And what's happened on some of the projects is if the cost of it is $1 million, new development, which has been collected, can only account for 25% of it. If the city doesn't have the other 75% to pay for it, we're unable to do the projects until the funds have until we have developed more funds to be able to pay for it. So as far as the specific projects are in the development impact fee, we can refer back to the development impact fee study, and we can actually pull out those projects and look at them. And there are several that Steve has been working on that have been done over the years where transfers had been made into the capital funds to be able to do the projects, but offhand, I don't have the list.
I'd like to see a list of those projects. I think we have wider discretion that we think we have. I'm not sure what the limitations are legally, but I know from my experience in Calistoga that we use those funds for all kinds of different things, recreational equipment, all kinds of things, and that I'd hate to, the things like doors and windows at the Carnegie Building, those kinds of things. That's what I'm looking for. It's like, why are we waiting on that? Let's spend this money down unless we have a policy that says, no, we want to save it for a larger project. That's my concern. I'd like to see exactly what we can use that money for, because that's $634,000. There might be some things there that we can stave off future maintenance needs if we can repair them now. If that's the case, I would like to see what
Right.
the law
No,
and what the list is, and can the list be changed if it's not adequate to meet our current needs.
Right. I'm happy to send it to you. just as a general caution for the impact fees, has to fund new development share. That usually means new improvements, not maintaining existing improvements. That's the issue. And there is a specific project list, and there is a way to update it. And if we're doing an update every couple of years, it's not an issue to create a new project and update the study. But
I don't think it's necessarily new projects. I think it's impact on existing infrastructure, but we need to look into that.
Okay, very good. Any further questions of Director Palmer? All right, who's next?
Well, it's me. It's my recommendation time.
Well, I think I have to open the public hearing.
Oh, yes, you do. So I am
Does
done.
anybody want to speak at public hearing? Ms. Manette?
Yeah, hi, I'm Bobby Monette. I'm speaking as a resident. And first of all, these are really so interesting to look at the department breakdowns, because it's like, wow, you guys really do work hard, and it's really a time to see, you can think about it, but when you actually see this stuff, I really want to thank everyone and commend everyone on the staff for working so hard and doing so much. And there's so much to do to run a city, and who would know? This is very, very educational for me. I had a couple of other things. And in terms of the sewer thing, Councilmember Pitts brought up an analysis, and it seems to me that the septic tank, first you need to find out whether or not there's any problem having the septic tank. If it's not a problem, it might be nice to not overtax the sewer system with demands that don't have to be there if the septic tanks are working, if it's not going into a stream, because I don't see any reason to fix something that's not broken. And we don't want to overtax the sewer system. I don't know if that would, but that's what I'm thinking. Maybe before any of those conversions would happen, there could be some kind of analysis to see if it's really necessary. And also, I'm going to throw this in. If that is going to be required every time a house is for sale, then I would push to have every time a house is sold that any substandard fireplace be required to be updated, which is a far less expensive endeavor, and it's one of my babies, and I would like to see that happen to keep our air as clean as possible. I would like to see that happen anyway, but certainly if this were going to happen, it would fall into place that might be a possibility. And the other thing I wanted to ask Director Palmer. I remember when we were talking about the levee years ago, and I received a protocol for levee maintenance, and it was extensive, and it called for the city to have a team that would do it was very precise, and the director at the time said that it was integrated into the duties of the people in the Public Works Department. But I know our funds have been cut since then, and I was wondering, maybe I just didn't see it, or I was wondering, is there any place in your, in the things that are being done that involve that team and the very specified protocol that team is supposed to be following to maintain the levee? So I was wondering if that's incorporated. Is that an unfunded need? Is that already incorporated into the duties of your staff?
All right, would you please sit down? We'll have the Public Works Director comment if he can. The first was a septic tank issue. If it's not broken, why worry about it?
I don't think I actually have a comment on that. I don't really have. I mean, that's something we go into the analysis.
On that point, do we benefit from more users, or is it a detriment?
Well, it cuts both ways, because if you have more users, I mean, ostensibly it improves the environment, but to the extent you don't have capacity, you need to make capacity increases to accommodate them, so it can be more expensive.
Well, do we have capacity?
We do have some capacity, yes, right now.
Okay.
At one time, we thought we did not, and there was a whole 5 years ago with the last permit renewal, we thought we did not have enough capacity, and the city spent significant money and resources developing the new permit that would require us to add capacity at the plant. And with the new permit renewal, we went back and analyzed it and realized, well, no, we don't. We're actually are well under the 0.5 mg design capacity of the plant, and we're at 0.35. So we don't need to increase capacity. So it can widely change depending on what's going on in the community, especially with water conservation. You're reducing flows, and
because here's the thing: if we have the capacity and we have this deferred maintenance, and our reserves are zero right now, and they're going to go negative, there are fixed, costs that if we can spread those over a larger population, it's less of an impact each individual user. If we have a smaller population we're spreading over, it's a greater impact, I think, in terms of upkeeping and replacing equipment over time. And so just from that perspective, and that perspective might be flawed, it seems to me that we all benefit from having a larger user base if we have the capacity, right?
All right, and the next issue was substandard fireplaces. My reaction to that was that that's something that would come up in connection with design review. If a house were designed and had substandard fireplace, it would be attacked at that point.
Yeah, no new fireplaces are allowed that are not compliant with the Air Board requirements. However, existing fireplaces that aren't being proposed for renovation are not required to be modified under current regulations.
And then the last issue was levy maintenance, Director Palmer, on the levy.
Yes, we are keeping up with the protocol that Ms. Manette mentioned.
Okay, very good. All right, I think that concludes. Oh, you had some final comments.
Thank you very much. My recommendation tonight is to adopt the 16-17 maintenance and operations budget as presented. And I did just want to point out that in the staff report on the second page, there is a chart that does state the specific reductions and additions done as directed by council from the May 4th budget workshop. And with the exception of what's in this little box, there's been no other changes from the proposed budget on May 4th. So thank you very much for listening, asking questions, and helping us through this process as well. I appreciate it.
I would like to see whether the council would be interested in just one minor change, but perhaps not so minor in terms of the community, and that is to allow the city clerk to get the software that would enable her to record the Public Records Act requests. $6,000.
I think I'd like to have a little bit more information on what the cost is. I'm in favor of going in that direction. I think they were going to report back in terms of, is that 6,000 or 6,000 a year, or what that is.
Good. Can you bring it back at the next meeting?
We could still approve this budget, though, and that could be an amendment.
Yes, absolutely.
Right,
All
we would just bring that back as a different item. I mean,
that's fine.
Technically, the item is within my signing authority, but if the council would like to see the item come back before you, we can do that as well. It wouldn't be at the next meeting. We just need a little more time than that, but we would bring it back in August.
Oh, that's fine. Okay, good. All right.
Well, I would move approval of the budget, and thank you for your enormous amount of work and all the department heads.
Is there a second?
Second. Oh, go on.
No problem. Roll call, please.
Kroll,
Yes.
Vice Mayor White,
Yes.
Pitts,
Yes.
Doring,
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith.
Yes. Okay, that takes us to the final item, our sales tax item. And let's see, in the absence of Ms. Black, guys, who is taking
me.
this? You.
I told Ms. Black I would try to make her proud tonight.
Okay, good.
So I'd like to acknowledge the work that our city clerk, Cindy Black, did in preparing the items before you today. And she's very disappointed that she can't be here to present this. She put a tremendous amount of work into prepping this item, and I'm sorry, too, that she can't be here to present it for you. But I'm happy to do that, and so I'm going to walk you through the transactions and use taxes and non-binding advisory measures. This is just a discussion item for council's opportunity, again, to review these two items, and then decision-making will come later in the process. So as a background, I'm going to refer to this as a sales tax because that's the more commonly used phrasing. The technical phrase is transaction and uses tax. Oh. Hold on. Off my page. So as a little bit of a background, this was discussed in the 2015 goal setting, was securing the city's financial future. The council directed staff to look at different revenue options. Included in the 15-16 budget was funding for a polling survey, which was conducted in January, February of this year. We pulled two different items. It was mostly focused on the real property transfer tax in a charter city, but we did add at the recommendation of the Revenue Source Task Force questions about a potential sales tax. And so those polling results were presented to the council. On the 2016 goal setting, we discussed the Revenue Source Task Force report and continued to show interest towards revenue-enhancing options. The polling results were brought to you on March 22nd, which indicated that the real property transfer tax did not poll well, but the sales tax polled slightly better and did have a potential of passing in St. Helena. On May 24th, more information about a potential sales tax initiative was brought before you, and then council directed staff to return with this item tonight with more specific information on placing a sales tax measure on the November 2016 ballot, and that's what we're doing this evening. So again, I'll be referring to it as a sales tax, but it's a transaction and uses tax. We are looking at the November 8th, 2016 ballot. Council directed us to look at a 0.5% sales tax increase with no sunset, and basically for general purpose uses, with sort of the idea of maintaining current levels of service to ensure adequate rainy day fund and provide funding for police, fire, and public works and some other areas as well based on council direction. The proposed ordinance would amend the St. Helena Municipal Code. It must be approved by a majority of the voters, so as a general tax, it wouldn't require a 2/3 vote. It does require a 2/3 vote of the City Council to place the measure on the ballot. I did want to point out that Councilmember Pitts will not be joining us for the second meeting in June and the first meeting in July. And so that's when these items will be brought before you. So you will only have 4 members of the council at the meetings when you will require all 4 of you to vote in favor of this item. And if you don't, then this item will not move forward.
That's why we're going to get it all figured out tonight, right?
Right. To the chagrin of the city attorney. If this were to pass on the November ballot, the tax would become effective no sooner than April 1st, 2017. In 2014, we just did some research. 116 California cities had voter-approved sales taxes. We talked about this several times when we talked about a sales tax initiative. This is one of the few revenue options that cities have available to them today. And so you'll see there's 461 cities, and this is one of the mechanisms cities are using to be able to raise revenue. The revenue stays in St. Helena. We talked about that at the last meeting. It's estimated at $1.4 million annually. We receive 1% of the current sales tax, and that's $2.8 million, so this is a general estimate. This is a destination-based tax, and so it's for where the purchase occurs, and there is some nuances with regards to business-to-business taxing. The ballot language, it needs to be 75 words, and the response to the ballot measure is a yes or no by voters, and we would look for council to provide direction on that language. And so this is the language that we've drafted just as a proposal, and so I can finish the presentation, or council can talk about this language now. It's really, this is for your decision. Would you like me to continue, and then I can go back to this slide? Council also directed us to bring information back on a non-binding advisory measure. This is an opportunity for citizens to vote on a non-binding question. It's an indication of general voter opinion regarding the ballot proposal. In no manner does it control the legislative body. Again, it needs to be 75 words, and it would be a yes or no question, and we would ask that you provide us direction with regards to that as well. The process, we're looking for input to be able to finalize the ordinance and the ballot measure. We would bring this back at the next meeting, June 28th, for a public reading, a public hearing and a first reading. The second reading would occur on July 12th. If the council votes to adopt, we would also have available for you additional resolutions. 2 of the resolutions would be for submission of the measure to the voters. And additional measures would be with regards to the ballot arguments. At first, I thought that I would be able to bring these forward, but we've been working with our polling consultant, and we need to have some additional time. This has all happened relatively quickly, and so we're going to bring the ballot argument information to you at a subsequent meeting and not this meeting. So the 2 things that we need direction on from you tonight are to take a look at the language for the proposed sales tax measure and the language for a proposed non-binding advisory measure. And I'm here, and the city attorney's here to answer any questions you might have.
How many words do we have so far?
These are both very close to 75. We basically filled your 75.
Look,
I have 2 initial questions.
go ahead.
One, in the ballot language versus the advisory measure language, the idea, in terms of how they flow, the city's long-term financial stability is at the beginning of the advisory, but it's sort of at the end of the list of things in the ballot language. Was there a reason for that? 'Cause it seems like a really important piece that I think should be up front, but I'm curious as to why they weren't consistent.
So a lot of it went off of the polling results and what polled well with the community.
Oh, those were the top ones, the ones that at the beginning.
Right.
But if you flip over to the advisory measure language,
It's lower.
we start with the long-term financial stability. That's what I'm just,
Yeah, that's. I thought we did it in the
and here we have it near the end.
near the end.
Yeah.
Well, we can go back and
We can
look
come
at the,
back to that.
Yeah, look at the polling results and put it in the order of how it polled with our community.
Right.
Well,
I was just
yeah.
curious if there was a reason why they were the different order between the two. The other question I had was I don't really understand why we can't, pass the ordinance so that we don't have to wait the 110 days after the election till April whatever to start actually seeing the sales tax increase. Is there a way to shorten that time frame?
I believe that's the legal, that was given to me by the city attorney, so that's the
It's
legal.
too long.
Yeah, all of these times are governed either by the Revenue and Taxation Code or by the Elections Code.
But is 110 days, I thought it was after, bringing the ordinance online, and can we bring that online now in anticipation of the tax passing? No, because this is what we're actually voting on is the ordinance, right?
Right, but the ordinance isn't valid unless the voters vote on it.
But we're not voting on the half cent. We can't put the ordinance in place and then have the half cent be what they vote on?
No.
Okay.
I don't believe that.
Good try.
Okay.
I also wanted to mention, in talking with the polling consultants, they did want to mention or have me mention that the non-binding advisory measures haven't always been successful, and there's a perception that the November ballot's going to be very, very full with a wide variety of initiatives for the voters to consider from a state, local, county perspective. And so just to really think about that non-binding measure, if it's council's decision to do that, it absolutely falls within your purview. But there has been some confusion in some cities that voters have voted against the sales tax measure but voted for the non-binding measure, not
Yeah,
understanding.
yeah.
And
Or
so,
no to both.
or
because
no
they
to
just
both because it's just,
Get through, yeah.
so it's,
So what if they vote for the sales tax measure, but no to what we explained?
that's fine. That's fine.
That's fine from the city manager's perspective.
Well, sorry, that's legally fine. You still get the half cent.
I'm leaning towards just doing the proposed sales tax on this
So
ballot.
I thought that was important information. That was helpful for me to learn that as well.
And I don't mind the way that the order goes on this, because I think a lot of people just start reading at the beginning and they look at vital city services, roads, streets, sidewalk, which is way more concrete for them than long-term financial stability. So I actually kind of like the way this is ordered. But I'm open to suggestions.
I would say, what do the polling experts say, and what resonates with folks, and I may have an opinion on what seems more attractive to voters, but I think there's some expertise out there that we should lean on and rely on to get people excited about this, so it passes.
Or that most people are just gonna read proposed sales tax. That's it. Yes or
Well,
no?
vital city services, it's broad. Maybe it's leading, like you said, Sharon, but with road, street, sidewalk, things that are concrete, but defer to the experts once again.
Yeah,
They have reviewed this language, and so that's,
This is sort of what the experts
yes.
came up with.
Yeah, I think they've done a very good job myself. My suggestion would be, let's go with this language for the ballot measure. I'm inclined to agree with Ms. Kroll about having two, unless we can say it's okay to vote no on the second one if you voted yes on the first one. But maybe a little conversation with the experts and see what they what they think, but I'm inclined to agree with Councilmember Kroll on that one. Mr. Doran, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I have a question with respect to the polling person said the words vital city services. That language needs to be in there because I think it's a little bit presumptuous. I think the voters can determine what they think is vital. I'm just trying to find more words, frankly.
Oh, because you could just say to maintain
But I don't.
local roads.
I know you hate when we get into wordsmithing, and I'm not attempting to do that. But I know in other measures I've seen language saying that the money stay locally, and I think that's important. And you say benefiting, and maybe that's the same thing of saying that. And then my other point is, I don't know what we mean by park and library maintenance. The word maintenance could be construed as a janitor or a maintenance worker cleaning the bathrooms, and I'm not sure that's the intent. I don't think that's the intent. I think the intent is to maintain our current levels of
service
operations. So I would say park maintenance and library operations or something like that.
Parks
To me,
and
it's confusing.
library.
Yeah, or whatever. I just don't want people to get confused. Oh, we're going to the word maintenance. I think I know it's probably we intend to be a broader meaning to maintain our current level, but the way it's said is a little confusing. And yeah, the more specific, the better. And I guess the other question I had is, what are we trying to say? That I'm concerned that I don't want to overstate what we're trying to say. I don't want people to think, oh, you will lose 911 emergency medical if you don't vote for this, because I think everything's at risk in the city because of our funding situation. There's no doubt. I'm very convinced of that. But because we talk about, well, the chopping block is going to be if we have to go into cutting our operations. Oftentimes we talk about recreation and library being the number one areas that will be cut. But now we're saying, well, if implicitly we're saying, well, these other things will be cut, and I don't know if that's true or not, or not entirely true. So I'm concerned about that, and I know the language is there because of. Well, I don't know why it's there. I mean, partly because of what the polling folks have said, but I don't want to scare people either into voting for it, but I also want to be realistic. So there's a balance there.
I could make one suggestion. Again, I don't like wordsmithing either, but you could say to provide funding to support vital city services. I think that might get around your problem. And also the word maintenance comes up again, so you're not repeating the same word through there.
Could be core instead of
No,
vital.
I mean, I think maintain vital city services, because we've said it over and over and over again. If we don't come up with some new revenue, we're not going to be able to maintain what we're even doing today.
Well, you could put park maintenance and library services.
I definitely disagree with wordsmithing and trying to kind of micromanage the wording on this. I think it's clear that what we're trying to say there, and I mean, truthfully, I think everybody in town is going to know from all of our discussions or from what we're going to go out and tell everybody that we really need it to just maintain what we've got.
I don't really want to be dismissed that quickly. I think these are important words, and I wouldn't bring them up just for the fun of it.
That's just my opinion.
No, I know. I mean, if you think it's clear that park and library maintenance is clear when other people have said, well, it's not entirely clear, I would prefer to be, park maintenance and library operations or something like that. That's all I'm saying. I don't want to spend a lot of time getting into detail because 99% of it is something I can accept.
Well, I agree with Paul, and I think park maintenance and library services makes it a little bit clearer, so it's not like the physical structure of the library.
That's it for me.
Okay.
But I do think also there has been, not in this budget cycle, but in the past, I have definitely been involved in discussions on whether we would get rid of our dispatch and combine with Calistoga. I mean, that's been a topic, not, like I said, not in this budget, but that was a huge topic before. So I don't think that would shock people if they thought that was maybe a possibility.
I had a conversation with someone last week that was talking about how important it is that we maintain that we keep that we don't go to
Okay,
the
that's
county
fine.
model. But
If that's the case, that's fine.
Well, people went crazy about it before, which is why it wasn't at issue in this budget. We found a way to preserve it.
we've
But-
got to get this right. I don't think wordsmithing and looking at it is all that wrong, as long as we don't do something that the experts say is wrong, right?
But I do feel more comfortable with park maintenance and library services because I do think library maintenance, it sounds like the HVAC system, which it could be, but library services seems more all-encompassing.
Well, for folks that want to see more hours, this is maybe an opportunity to actually see a few, not much, but a few more hours. On the, the one thing that's missing here that I think is in the rider language or in the advisory, and I agree that having two might scare people off because all of a sudden they say, wait a second, we're getting taxed twice here, or what's going on? It just might mislead folks. Like, if you go to the advisory language, I thought there was some discussion about maintaining community safety and small town character that's not in the ballot language, and that might resonate with people. That part of this is going to allow us to maintain the small town character, and why is that cut out?
No, it's in the last line.
No, but we're not going to put this on here based on what we're discussing.
Maybe because we're running out of words.
Right.
So you've got to adopt a half-cent sales transactions and use generating approximately. I think that may have chewed up the words. But we could
Well, what
try.
if you-
'Cause remember,
go
you've
back-
got
would you-
75.
Is St. Helena being counted as one word?
Yeah.
Well, you could say,
Yes.
could you go back to
I
the
think it
first
is.
one?
It should be. It's a
It
name.
is. It was on the election.
It is.
Council members.
You could, if you took out the vital city services and just went straight to the services,
All right.
on the first
You have a few more
tax
words.
language, to provide funding to maintain local roads, streets, sidewalks, 911 emergency, it might buy you a few words. I don't know.
How about to maintain small town character and local roads, streets, sidewalk maintenance, etc. Again, that's like, do you lead with the big vision, or do you put that last? I don't know.
See, I'm not the only one.
I want to know what.
I don't know.
You know exactly what small town character means.
Right. I think that belongs at the end.
Here.
It's really not this. I mean, we're talking about money to save the town. Not. It's
could just
beyond
say
small
that.
town character. Actually, I mean, we need this. We need this to pass so badly. But
Look,
Boil it down to 3 words.
I think in general, I think Paul made a good point about library maintenance, and Director Kroll, or Councilmember Kroll's made a good point about services. I think that's a good change. But otherwise, my suggestion would be that we instruct staff to go with this language, and if there's some variations that the experts say we should consider, bring it. But I think as Councilmember Doring said, this is 99% on target, and
I kept 1% out.
yeah, and that I would suggest to council that be the direction to staff tonight.
Well, time out. We're talking about removing language that the experts came up with that did include the small town character, and if that's emotional to certain folks and they advise that we should find a way to put it in there, we should put it in.
I have that down as a no.
I agree.
Okay.
No,
I
have
wasn't
that
suggesting
down.
that be removed at all. I would-
Okay, all right.
Add it in.
I think it's
But if
important.
we're only going to do the ballot measure and not the,
Right.
If we're only going to do one.
Right.
can we look at this again? Can we have
Oh, I
another
see.
draft of
it's
this?
not in that one.
I see. Okay, I'd have no objection to it being
Yeah,
added.
that was my concern. It was, if we're removing that second piece, can we squeeze it in here somehow, if advisable, right?
Yeah, I've got no problem with that.
Because I would agree that, maybe we don't do the companion measure. I think it'll get.
Well, we're going to have an argument in favor in any event that will reinforce what we're saying. So,
There you go.
Yeah.
so I do think that Councilmember Kroll had a good point.
And I also agree that I think the companion measure is almost duplicative. It really is saying the same thing as what we're saying in the ordinance itself. I know it has different legal purposes, but it doesn't really add any value to us in my view. I think it detracts. So
Okay.
I would support not having the
All right.
non-binding
I mean,
advisory measure.
in
But some of the
this-
language, as you say, could be pulled from it to put into this, if it fits.
In the staff report, it talked about a lot of communities passing or trying to pass these types of taxes. We're putting companion measures in. Were they doing it to add more information? Because this is all the same information, right? That's
It's about trust. It's about the voter being involved in decision making and having a sense that because the 2/3 vote is so hard to achieve, that there is a sense of direction, that they're giving specific direction to the elected officials to utilize these funds in a certain manner. But it's a non-binding, so basically that the council can say, but the community told us to spend it like this, and so we're going to spend it like this, and they can change it, but it gives the council some direction directly from the community. The general sales tax or a general revenue tax like this, you sort of list these things, but you could use it for anything really. This isn't a commitment list. The non-binding measure was intended to give more power to the voters, a sense of power, because again, it's non-binding.
But it's non-binding, so it isn't powerful at all.
It's just a sense.
You said 2/3. That's in a situation where people are trying to pass something that requires 2/3. You're
when
saying
it's specific, right?
Because we're not doing that right
Right,
now. We're
so-
talking
so-
about 50% plus one.
Instead of being able to say, we're going to use this for streets and roads, which would require a 2/3 vote, that's a very difficult hurdle to reach. And so as a mechanism to increase trust, some cities came up with this non-binding measure to improve that trust.
And that I understand. But here, I mean, we're essentially saying the things that we do envision, right? They're non-binding anyway. Is there some strategic advantage? Like, I think it could backfire. I think people might see taxing me twice, right? And I'm going to vote no on both
definitely
of
think it could backfire, and I think we need to focus our energy on one.
I think the one gives you, it's easier with the educational information and how you communicate this to the community. You're talking then just about the sales tax versus there's going to be a sales tax measure and this non-binding measure, and this is what it's for.
Yeah.
And that's why the consultants wanted to be sure that we talked about the fact that this could potentially backfire.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
And I think through the arguments that I've seen from the folks that don't like any new taxes, they sort of leap on to any measure that they feel doesn't fairly portray or is trying to skirt around what the rules are. And here we're just not doing that. So I think in some ways it frees us from that type of attack.
Do we have to vote on that?
No, we're not voting tonight. But do you have enough direction at this point?
So I have direction. Do you want to open it for public comment?
Oh yes, let me open up public comment. Thank you.
Speaking as a resident, I just wonder, isn't there supposed to be the word tax after use? Yeah, it kind of doesn't make sense. I mean, I don't know if that extra word will bring it over 75 words, but it says adopt a half-cent transaction and use tax. Okay, and as a senior citizen with a disintegrating brain, my sense is, I agree with you guys, my sense is if I didn't understand what the other statement was about, I would be confused and just want to just say no to all of it. If I did understand what it was about, I would feel manipulated. So I think it's, from my perspective too, it's better left off. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good comments.
So the direction that I have is to make minor adjustments to the language to provide funding to city services. So take out maintain and vital. So just to provide funding to city services, and then to change the language park maintenance and library services. And if we can fit in small town character with our 75 word count, to try to be able to do that and to fix the typo that was just pointed out. And then to drop the non-binding measure.
Correct.
And so what?
And I'd like to hear back from the consultants about the word vital or
Yeah, 'cause
critical.
I like the word vital.
Because that may resonate.
Okay.
In fact, I think just looking around, I don't think we're giving you direction to drop the word vital.
Okay.
I think we'd like to hear more from the
I mean, frankly,
consultant.
I think you could put 911 emergency response and take out medical, police, and fire. 911 emergency response covers all of those. So if you're looking for extra words,
I like the mention of police and fire myself.
okay, well, you could take medical out. I don't know.
I'll work with the,
Right.
I'll
And
work
if-
with the consultants.
And if I can help, let me know, because I'm, without doubt, the most experienced person writing briefs dealing with word counts in the federal system.
You are, and you've been a great help. You offered your assistance, and you provided it in a very timely manner. We were very appreciative of that. So what we'll do is for the next meeting on June 28th, we'll have a public hearing, and this item will come before you in a final form for you to consider.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Have the consultants given us sort of a tally of, here are all the things that were voted on that had these rider measures, and X percent passed, and here are all those that didn't, and Y percent passed, and have we looked at that data?
I had a conversation with them this afternoon, and just to confirm their feelings about the non-binding measure, and they didn't give me statistics. It's just based on recent experience of the non-binding measure not being overly successful.
Okay.
Not being overly successful. Okay.
Okay, and with that, I'll declare that the meeting is adjourned, and I just want to thank staff for really very strong presentations this evening and sticking with it through. And very good questions from all members of the council, too.
Thank you.